Well, I'm delighted to welcome everybody on the first day of London International Shipping Week 2023 to the International Shipowning and Shipmanagement Summit. And we're recording it here from the offices of Norton Rose Fulbright here in the city of London, overlooking the Thames actually in the HMS Belfast. And I'm delighted that we have an excellent panel of speakers, keynote speakers, as well as panelists. Just a little bit of housekeeping, and we're starting to see the delegates coming into the room. You are able to send through Q&As, questions, and we will endeavour to answer those, and that'll be my job throughout the morning. But please send them through. There's also a chat facility you'll see, which will also enable you to talk to me as well on a sort of more of a private basis. If I can ask the panelists just to sort of put their cameras off, I can see Martin and David until they're called on to speak. The International Shipowning Management Summit today is looking at the 4 pillars of successful ship management, looking specifically at key issues such as compliance, skills, digitalisation, and the markets. And these are sort of key elements here, components, as the industry looks forward and looks to a very, very exciting future. So without any further ado, I'm going to, I can see Mark's got his camera on, and welcome, Mark, and lovely to see you here. And at the first day of London International Shipping Week as well. Welcome to London.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and looking forward to a very exciting week in London, I must say, and honoured to be on this panel, and very much looking forward to the discussion.
Well, we've also arranged for good weather as well this week, so that's quite
nice.
Nice.
Well done. That was a tough one.
I want to really touch first, Mark, if I may, on ESG. I mean, this is a key element, and certainly has been a phrase that's been bandied around certainly for about a year or so, and then also you get these other abbreviations coming in like DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability, all of these elements, but they are the bedrock, aren't they, of how the shipping industry now needs to move forward. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think to be a little bit critical, we as a sector have focused too much on net zero and the environmental aspects. I'll not say too much, but we focus perhaps solely on that, and not enough on the S and the G, which are equally important. And when one looks at the various pillars, they are the glue that hold all of these pillars together. So I think ESG, I think any of the companies out there that are forward looking and proactive have really moved on from sustainability reports, which of course we're doing, but to actually renaming them and refocusing them and re-objectizing them to ESG reports. And I have to say that after COVID, ESG is a generational opportunity for all of us to metamorphise our businesses going forward. It really is a fantastic rallying point or rallying flag for businesses to refocus, re-infuse and introduce that dynamic back into their people to go forward. So fantastic opportunity.
I mean, this will be something that we'll pick up, I'm sure, at the recruitment and skills panel later on. But what are the post-COVID? And I know through your company you did an awful lot as far as looking after the seafarers, the mental health side of it. But what are the seafarers saying to the employers now? Because the industry's changing. I mean, what are they saying?
I mean, I think we hear a lot, don't we, that there's not enough seafarers out there, and I think that's wrong. I think there are enough seafarers out there. There's not enough qualified seafarers out there to face the challenges that our sector are now looking at, and perhaps we're not doing enough for those seafarers. So I think now seafarers feel seen, whereas before they were invisible. Now that they're seen, they want something, and they want to be treated in the same way as a human resource that we do with our staff ashore. And that's our challenge. We really have to look at seafarers from a human resource management point of view and give them the self-same attention, the self-same benefits that we do now increasingly with our staff ashore.
Now, coming on to the role of the industry here and you've got to drive value to that bottom line. I mean, we're not doing it for the goodness of our health, running ships and working in this industry. What are the tools that you have at your disposal for that? Because, there are a lot of elements here you're having to deal with, Mark, as a ship management company or an operating company or a ship owning company. What tools do you have at your disposal?
I mean, I think clearly from a management company perspective, whether you're an external manager or an internal manager dealing with operations, you have to bring added value, and you have to make yourself relevant and compelling to the marketplace. Otherwise, you're better off doing something else. I've always said we have to now do more and better, and more and better and for less, and those are the three drivers that certainly we focus on all the time in delivering our services. We've got various tools to do that. We have this digitalization optimization facility now, and of course we're along with a number of the others on your panel, driving digitalization, driving optimization, performance optimization, control rooms to look at every aspect of our performance and optimize on that. But technology and digitalization are a means to an end. They're not the end itself. And I think as an industry, again, we're all too ready to latch on to something and think that's the panacea of everything. No, it's not. It's a tool. It's a tool in our toolbox. Equally important are our people, if not more important. And I would say digitalization and the technology are there to enhance our people's performance, not replace it. And really, really important. So people and the tools available to us to optimize and drive in that added value, drive in that optimization across the board, across all of our services.
I mean, do you think is shipping, because there are always going to be leaders, Mark, and there's going to be laggards. You hear this expression all the time. There's 9,000, 9,500, 10,000 ship owners out there, for instance. Yes. Is shipping agile enough to do this, or are you going to get that element where you've got one element, one sector, racing ahead at a certain speed, and others saying, well, yes, we will do that as well, given time?
I think our industry is so fragmented, we can't generalize, and nor do we need to in a certain way, because we have to remain client facing. So a small niche operator operating 2 or 3 or 4 vessels in a very niche market knows exactly where he or she needs to be on the optimization scale, on the people scale, etc. You've got to do stuff that you need to do and to stay relevant and compelling. On a higher level, a company like Columbia or a company like V-Ships or a company like Thome or SM, whatever, they will need to satisfy all their clients. So their client-facing demands are much more difficult and actually have to have everything available. But as I always said, it's as dangerous to be too far on the wave as too far behind. You just have to pick your wave and your point on that wave and make sure you follow through. And there are challenges and there are needs for all of us. We can't sit back and do nothing, but some will have to do more than others to remain relevant and compelling in their particular space. If that answers the question.
Yeah, and the title of this webinar today is the International Ship Owning and Ship Management Summit. And owners and managers during the pandemic. When you've got the 3 legs of that stool there with the seafarers, the owners, and the flag states all trying to work together within the maritime sphere to look after the situation. The owners and the managers collaborated well. You worked well to actually move your seafarers to look after them as far as that pandemic was concerned. Cooperation and collaboration within the industry, Mark. I mean, how is that going? How does that need to move forward? As far
I think some of us are showing collaboration in what we're doing and getting away from this third-party management concept, which is an anathema in my view. The sophisticated ship managers, ship operators will realize that to operate effectively, to optimize your operation, you have to collaborate and blend and be flexible on your models that you employ. I think on a wider picture throughout our sector, there needs to be more collaboration, there needs to be more partnership, there needs to be more singularity of message for the industry as a whole. Otherwise, we will be absorbed into the wider logistics sector. And in many ways, shipping has commanded an artificially special place, a separate place in that sector for hundreds of years. You don't have the same separateness from the rail. You don't have the same, or in the aviation industry, they're looked at as a totality, and we sit on the side. Now, unless we talk with one voice and really speak what is important for us, we will be absorbed. We will become irrelevant as a separate standing sector, and we'll be part of that. Might be the right answer. That might be the only way to get a singular logistics voice out there, but careful what we wish for, because that is in a sense coming anyway. When you look at the liner operators spreading their tentacles for all the right reason, I hasten to say, into the logistics world, they're doing it for a reason. Someone hasn't just woken up and said, you know what, we'll buy a share in an aviation industry, aviation company. No, they see that linked, the need for collaboration, and I think as an industry, our only hope of staying separate is that we speak with one voice and actually collaborate much more.
I mean, do you think there is enough collaboration from the owner's side as far as managers are concerned?
No. I think when you look back, and I started my career as a lawyer, when you look back at some of the early case law in the 1500s, which is still relevant, it talks about the maritime adventure and how everyone is in it together and sharing the risk together. And that's where insurance law and contract law came from. The result of that is that shipping became ruthlessly competitive and an embodiment of capitalism. So that is our inheritance. That is what we look back to. So to get the true collaboration between the ship owners is very, very difficult, and ship operators, because they are ruthlessly competitive and ruthlessly successful. Now, on some of these bigger issues, they've got to come together qua ship owners, not as wider logistics companies, and speak with one voice, because they don't need to compete. We don't need to compete with some of the good names on this platform on safety issues, on IT optimization issues, on all of these. There's plenty of areas to compete on the quality of our performance, but we have to come together on these big issues, because otherwise we'll wake up tomorrow morning and we'll have disappeared as a separate sector, and we'll be part of a bigger whole, which, as I said, may not be a bad thing.
I want to come on in a second to the InterManager side, and certainly looking at general principles and stuff, because I think there's a key element there we want to talk about. I mean, on turnkey service platform solutions, and going back to that sort of digitalization side, what are your thoughts on that? Because
this comes down to collaboration, and we took an early view that our clients, to be truly client facing, want to focus on what they're good at and what's important to them, the commercial side of and the asset owning side of their business. They don't want to deal with the supply of widgets or the lube or supplies or this or that or any of the other services, highly important though they are. So we believe, to be truly client facing, you have to have an integrated services platform linked to the service we do. So you have the management, the technical management, you have the crew management, and you have all of the other services that are necessary, a real 360 degrees that the client can link, and that all of these services link in and speak to one another and speak the same language, so you drive through optimization. So an integrated services platform, we believe, is the goal, the objective for all of our clients, allowing them to pick and choose, but also focus on what's important for them.
Yeah. So coming on to the InterManager, the industry itself. When we talked, I think it was on ISSS in online during COVID, during London Shipping Week 2021, and you talked about that need for industry collaboration and coming together, and we talked about standards, Mark, within the industry. Give me your thoughts on this whole issue of general principles? What you're trying to strive and achieve through this, and what you want to achieve through this?
I think look, this was my mandate when I came into InterManager, and my failing was that, well, not failing in the sense that it was understandable failing, was that we couldn't get it through earlier because we were sidetracked by COVID, and then we were sidetracked by the Russian war. So this it's taken longer than we would have wanted, but alongside this whole idea of the need for collaboration, the need for partnership, the need to speak with one voice, the need to share aspects and improvements in our industry that are non-competitive, that shouldn't go to the competition, safety, technology, etc. There's a huge need for this collaboration, and that's what these general principles aim to do. And they aim to raise the game too, so that the argument that a external manager, I'll call it an external manager rather than a third party manager, an external manager performs a lesser job or lesser quality job than an in-house manager, that it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny and shouldn't stand up to scrutiny, because all of the members of InterManager aspire to and ascribe to these general principles and are willing to be tested on that and be willing to be audited on that and willing to share those results with their clients. And how fantastic would that be? And what drove me in this is when I was started out on this path with InterManager, and we tried to increase the membership. I went to a particular manager who was resisting joining, and he said, "I'm not interested in this at all. As long as we're okay, I'm actually not that bothered about the rest of the industry." And I thought, yeah, great for you, but not great for the industry, and not great for our reputation, and not great for the clients at the end of the day, or the seafarers on board. You have to see the bigger picture. So I will be coming back to that particular individual now with the general principles and say it's a no-brainer for you to join. Why would you possibly not want to ascribe to these principles that can only drive performance and standards north as opposed to south, and can only be for the benefit of our industry as a whole?
No, thank you very much for that, Mark, and for your comments today. And just to remind delegates, I know they've been flooding into the room here, and more will be coming in. If you have any questions, please send them through on the question and answer there. But Mark, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For your
Good luck
time this morning. Thank you. Super.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Okay, and just now going on to our second keynote speaker. We're very delighted and very excited to have René Kofod-Olsen, who's Chief Executive Officer of V.Group. Now, René, I think you're going to do a bit of technical sharing, aren't you, your screen today? So
I certainly could.
Okay, well, you should be able to do it, and if there's any problem, just let me know. But
technical. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Sean, for inviting me to this exciting opportunity to present to all of you. I have been challenged to speak about disruption, and I think they're coming to a theater near everybody here on this call. So if I look at it sort of from a helicopter perspective, during my more than 30 years in this industry, I've witnessed massive disruption. Of course, to a various degree, but I was reflecting over the weekend, and I actually started training on a telex machine. For those of you who remember that, is probably the older crowd on this call. So that's how much we have moved over the last 30 years, certainly in terms of technology to support us. We have been through a massive amount of economic shocks, changes in trade patterns, sanctions, port automation. And of course, some countries that has been on steroids in terms of economic prosperity and of course supply chain. Latest, the COVID-19, and then all the environmental complications and regulations that we are now seeing. Mark spoke certainly about those disruptions as well. Digitalization is sort of, in my view, going at a speed that I do not believe all of us recognizes right now. 6 months ago, none of us probably had ever heard about ChatGPT. Now it's something that is in every coffee conversation for many people, particularly the younger crowd in the shipping. So it is going very, very fast. And therefore, this is one of the massive disruptions that you'll see going forward. And we all need to get on that bandwagon. So I think, obviously, there has been some disruptions that has been more systemic, I suppose you can say, or temporary in nature. And we'll adapt to that. One thing that I've learned in shipping is that we are extremely good at adaptation to changing environments or changing situations. It's quite amazing. I don't know an industry that is better at that. That has a flip side, of course, that we are also very reactive. We need to be more proactive. We need to be more collaborative and so on. But Mark also covered that in his great Q&A with Sean. Some of the things that we have seen over the years have been sort of quite binary. You all remember the double hull discussions in the early 90s. And of course, that was very binary. Go and get double hull or double hulls produced and as a safety measure, of course, logically. That was pretty binary, as I mentioned. Today, it's not. They're coming from all angles. Some are coming with a speed, as I mentioned, on digitalization that we have difficulty understanding. So our adaptability as an industry will continue to really be put to the test, and consistently so. So as I'm showing you some of these slides, of course, we want to ensure that we are playing in that. We are constantly committed. We are constantly a partner of progress in this fantastic industry. But fundamentally, we are thinking. Sorry, my notes just went away. Fundamentally, we are thinking about 4 main dislocators, and those are the ones that I want to talk to you all about today as we move further into this presentation. I really have some technical difficulties, so I beg your pardon. I hope you can see this presentation.
Yeah, it's all fine, René. Just click your screen normally as go from one slide to the next, but we can see it all.
Yeah. Okay. So then it's just my screen that is acting up. Just bear with me for 2 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna take this down. So I basically believe that there are 4 dislocators. The dislocators, as I refer to them, is really the whole situation around decarbonization. It's around people. It's around digitalization, and of course, when we talk about the decarbonization, we also have to talk about the S&G, as Mark referred to, meaning that we have such a big part of these dislocators that are actually going to hit us. So those are fundamentally the 4 that I'm focusing on here. So if you go into the first, the sustainability and decarbonization, we need to prepare as an industry, whether you're a ship owner or whether you are in the integrated ship management function. And yes, we don't necessarily control the balance sheet, but we certainly are one of the key parts of running the balance sheet for our clients. And we certainly are one of the industries that need to be on the front foot in terms of both advising, but also ensuring that the industry is moving in the right direction. And whether that is the CII regulations, whether it is the EEI requirements in terms of how we retrofit the ships and how we think about the future, actually, of what do the ships need to be propelled by in the future. That should be on the forefront of any ship owner's mind, but it certainly should also be on the forefront of our industry and what we can do in terms of pushing. If you look at some of the surveys that has been out there, then this particular topic, and I don't think it's because it's fashionable, I think it is because it is very meaningful, both in terms of their clients, but certainly also in terms of the environment that we are all part of. This is the topic that is on the mind of 85% of all ship owners, and therefore this is top of mind. We need to get this right. More than 90% of global trade is basically waterborne, and 71% of this planet is, of course, water, and therefore we are there to stay, as we have been for hundreds of years. Regulation is then the sort of the second part of it, and of course we have seen that playing out in the latest disruption with the sanctions linked to the war in Ukraine. And of course, this is a minefield that we all have to navigate, and we have to navigate it right. And our industry has to be on a front foot and completely compliant with everything that we are doing. So we must follow these regulations as they come. And I actually believe that this is one of the things that we will see disrupting us even more as we go on, as big countries are fighting as big countries are fighting on trade sanctions or trade regulations or whatever it is something that we, carrying more than 90% of global trade, will have to adapt to. And we must set up functions to be able to do that. We have now some 500 or 600 vessels in what we call the so-called shadow fleet. Of course, that's a massive challenge for the industry. Also, from a safety perspective, we don't have access to support that safety. The global fleet don't have access to support that. The port authorities have their challenges with that. I think it's growing, and of course, we'll have to see how that will all play out. But these 500 or 600 vessels are certainly carrying sanctioned cargo that is not really having an access to us. So if you then go to the third dislocator, beyond the E and the S and G, it's people. To me, this is our most important asset. We are nothing, and particularly, of course, our industry is nothing without having the right people, both on our fantastic vessels traveling the sea or on shore. That's a key for us. So we will, as an industry, find it more difficult to continue attracting the right talent. I mentioned probably 10, 12 years ago when I was in Topaz that one of the biggest challenges of the future will be the brain drain in shipping generally, as it got more attractive to work in other parts of business. It continues to play out. And therefore, we are really on a mission to create the best possible workplace, whether it be on shore or whether it be on our vessels. It is incumbent on us to deliver that for the men and women. That comes to training, it comes to loyalty program, it comes to ensuring that there's bandwidth enough on board the ship so you can have access at least to a minimum of the amenities that you would have when you are back home with your family and so on. We need to create A to Z seafaring careers so everybody understand, well, if I do this for this amount of years, I can then go and work for an integrated ship manager, or I can go and work for a ship owner. I can go and work for any other part of the shipping. Our clients, the big oil majors, or the big retail companies. I think that's very, very important, and we must take our responsibility, whether you are in the ship management part of the industry or the owner part. And this is not a competitive situation. We must ensure that we get more, particularly females, on board our ships. It's a safe environment. They are 50% of this global population, and I think we need that. The verdict is out in terms of moving this forward. How many shortages will we have in the future? Some pundits believe that we will have as much as 56,000 officers short by already 2027. That's sort of 4 years from now. It's a stark reminder that all of us in shipping has to do more for this critical colleague of ours that is on the high seas. Now, the fourth I wanted to talk about is, of course, digitalization. I teed it a little bit up in the beginning. This is there for us as a tool, not as a replacement, to optimize everything we're doing, including on the decarbonization, as I mentioned, as one of the biggest dislocators. Digitalization is a massive assistance for all of us to harness, particularly if we harness it effectively. Artificial intelligence or machine learning, or whatever you want to call it, can only be relevant if you have the right data of output that it can look at and it can machine learn on and create trend analysis and so on. So it is only as good as what you put into it. But it is something that I think all of us need to be absolutely sure that we focus on. Mark mentioned whether this is a competitive environment. I don't know. I think he's right. It shouldn't be. We need to have the best digital tools for everybody. I think it's fantastic what Elon Musk is doing on the Starlink and so on, and other companies are riding the tails of that. That means that we can get more bandwidth on all the parts of this planet that is not necessarily on the digital highway, which fundamentally and traditionally has been the 71% that is waterborne, because we are focused on the landmass. So we predict a sort of a minimum 10% annual growth in the deployment of ERP system and the development of ER systems that are actually coming. And this is very, very important for us to continue developing that. We have our own ERP system in our particular company, and it is something that we are allocating a lot of our capital to continue developing for the reasons I've just mentioned, but also to attract talent. I think it's very difficult to get the young men and women that we need into this industry if we don't have the right digital platform. They are not used to working analog the way that many of us were used to work as we grew up in this fantastic industry. So it is incumbent on us to ensure that we have those right digital system, and the communication, yes, become between a human being to a human being, but also by, with, and through the systems that we are putting to the usage, both on ships and at shore. Of course, this is not an easy puzzle to solve, I'm absolutely sure. But I think this is for us to ensure that we understand that dislocator, and actually we understand that we need to be able to solve all these four. Now, what does this mean? And why do I talk about these dislocators? I believe that this industry is, of course, not as big as it should be. I was quite surprised when I came in to the industry 3 years ago to see that only 16% of global shipping is actually outsourced. If you look at many other balance sheet aspects of the industries around us, real estate, in the office I'm sitting in, everything will be outsourced to equivalent companies like us that are able to do everything in the value chain. And I think from my perspective, that is massively important. We simply need to ensure that we are relevant, we are competitive, and we are seen, also because that's what we are doing, to operate ships exactly to the same standards as any ship owner could do. And we can do it at scale. Mark mentioned that a vessel owner with 3 or 4 ships would have their own parameters of how to run this. But vessel owners with 100 ships will, of course, be doing it at a completely different scale. And there, the outsourcing as an option is obviously something that will create massive value, I believe, to any ship owner, also facing these dislocators. And therefore, I'm seeing that with the disruption we are having in shipping, we should be, as an industry part, able to deliver a much bigger service for that. That's why we have set up our company sort of in two distinct divisions. One is the shipping division, that is what you would call traditional ship management and crew management. And then our whole service portfolio, where A to Z, cradle to grave, we are able to support the value chain, whether it be digital, whether it be engineering, whether it be traveling, and supply chain and so forth, even insurance. And we are touching some 3,000 vessels on that. So for us, that scale that we are giving to clients is obviously of a huge importance to us and to our clients. And we are seeing more and more opening up for the fact that actually our focus as a ship owner, and lately we announced that we had made a long-term strategic partnership in Norway with Bell Ships, and their focus, of course, have to be on all the aspects that is important for their strategy. And that doesn't mean that running these fantastic vessels is not, but they have to put the tactical and capital allocation where it makes sense for them in terms of growing their fleets, in terms of commercializing their fleet, ensuring they have the right strategies on the whole decarbonization journey, and so on and so forth, where we can actually go in and run the ships completely up to the highest standard that they, of course, would demand. So those kind of partnerships we are seeing more and more of, and more interested in, and we should be measured exactly as we own the ships. That's how we are speaking internally in our company. We certainly expect that our client's client would also appreciate that the way we run the vessels is that we own the vessels ourselves. We don't distinguish between an Aframax and an LNG. It's very important for us how we run that, or handysize to a leisure ship. All of us wants to run the ships exactly to the highest possible quality, and so we will continue investing in adapting to these dislocators, as I've talked about. We will continue focusing on where we believe we can drive this industry. I personally will continue doing as much as I can, shoulder to shoulder with the other great integrated ship managers here on this call, as also Mark suggested, to ensure that it is us as an industry that has to move the 16% to the next milestone, 20%, 25%, because we can, because we are credible, because we are credible alternative. I think that's very important. We are partnering with great companies, for instance, on the sustainability agenda. Maersk Zero Carbon, we went in as one of the early movers there, and everything we're benefiting from there would be benefiting as an industry. We are doing partnerships on the digital side. Everything should be available to the industry. So I think we as an integrated ship management company, and with our colleagues on the ship management side, I can only encourage the right collaboration, the right forward view, so that we compete in earnest. We focus on these dislocators for shipping, and I'm absolutely convinced that doing this right and fighting, of course, with each other, because that keeps us on our toes, Sean, and everybody on the call, that has to be the case. But we can actually move this fantastic industry, and we can make a difference that matters, both as a company, but certainly also as an industry, and that's our expectation.
René, thank you very much for that. We just got a little bit up on
Sorry
time.
for the technical lead.
No problem. We got a couple of questions that have come through, and one here from Sam. What is your take on nuclear propulsion? And our clients asking you about this. Just give me a brief response on that, if you can.
I will. I will do two things. Come to our event on the 12th, or look at the recording where we are actually going to have a panel with an author that has focused a lot on new super trends and so on, and of course Bo Seop and others will be there. I'm pretty sure we're going to discuss this. So to me, it's an alternative. I have for many years spoken about thorium infused nuclear, which is basically a safe nuclear, with all parameters in mind, compared to uranium, of course. And I think you can modularize them in the future. Yeah. So I think there is a future, maybe in a decade, where even from a cost perspective, you would be able to have a modular thorium molten salt reactor that should be able to propel your vessel or any other that needs energy. So yeah, I think it's a credible alternative.
René, thank you very, very much indeed. Please, you'll have to turn your camera off now, because we've got Olav coming on. But thank you very much indeed for that. Please stay here listening to the webinar. But thank you very much for that, and thank you for the questions that are coming through. So next we have Olav Nortun, who's CEO of OSM Thome. And Olav, welcome. And I think you're calling in from Singapore. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. Thank you, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're sitting and listening.
So we're talking really about the four pillars of successful ship operation. We've got issues there, such as skills, digitalisation, the markets, and also compliance. What's on your dashboard at the moment, Olav? There, I mean, there's a lot facing the industry as it moves forward. A lot of positives, but a lot of difficult issues, geopolitics, shifts in trade patterns, etc. What's on your dashboard at the moment?
Okay, from the four pillars, I like the way you phrased it. So for me, decarbonization is the long-term haul for all this. 2050, 2050 is we're on it today, and it's something we can't avoid, and we have to thrive on. But what is the drivers for that, and how do we actually approach that digitalization part? But now the decarbonization through digitalization, I think what we're looking at now is, okay, we need to start using tools. We need to attract a younger more eager workforce that's used to work differently. And then going back again to the built in around the digitalization is, okay, we need to work differently. We need to kind of develop the tools. We need to be attractive as an employer. And I kind of, that's on my mind a lot on how do we do that? How do we actually become more attractive than we are? Is there enough talent out there? Yes, there is, but we need to give them an attractive place to work. And then leading and being that forefront, utilizing technology and drive that forward is kind of very much forefront of our mind. But what's really, as a ship manager, is always kind of making sure we have a safe and reliable operation. Without that, we do nothing. We can do the tools and all that, but then we use all the tools in the box to help the seafarers, the shore-based organization, to drive that in an efficient and more kind of what I call modern, more kind of in a way that attracts make us achieving the target in the long run, which is really to decarbonize the entire the maritime industry. And we need to leverage that digitalization. We need to leverage that part of it in a way that how we work with regulatory requirements, how we embrace that part of it, how we're going to work on environmental protection and crew welfare, not the least, and of course operational practices. So that's kind of an overall on this. But you mentioned somewhere in this that kind of we also need to engage really with our customers and partners and stakeholders to better understand what are the real needs and the requirements, how to best define good solution and cost-efficient solution by having all these tools at our disposals. So I'm coming from that perspective of how can we use the kind of the driver in the market today and the different tools to make sure we are more efficient, we are more customer-oriented, and we're integrated into the wider part of the industry. That's kind of a lot on my mind today.
Yeah, I mean, taking all that in consideration, I mean, there are going to be challenges ahead, Olav, in actually achieving that. And I think, you know, as I was talking with Mark earlier, you know, you've got those leaders in the industry who are going to be pushing forward all the time. What are the challenges that owners, operators, managers, charters? Let's bring the charters in on this as well, because you've got things like new fuels, you've got, you know, this whole drive that throws up, and we'll talk about it in our training element later on. But, you know, new fresh demands on training, you know, how do you handle ammonia, you know, all the rest of it. What would you say are the challenges facing? Some people say opportunities. Let's call them opportunities. But, you know, what are the challenges?
Yeah, well, again, I think from a technical perspective, it's not so challenging. We know a lot about it. We've been passed through something like this before. What we really have to do is kind of to see at what scale it comes to us. You know, let's take ammonia. Okay, it has an element of that we haven't dealt with before. Kind of the where we're used to flammable, not poisonous kind of elements that we have in ammonia. You know, so yes, this gives us the opportunity to think differently. How can we use the skill set we have today? How can we actually looking at, for example, building and training a new set of being seafarers and shore-based through a digital transformation? Can we use that and kind of approaching that part? Because some of it, you know, is going to be old school type of, we have to do it on board, we have to do it in the equipment we have. At the same time, we also have to use the digital part of that. You know, how do we monitor what is needed, what's needed to be differently? And just to share with you, we worked on a project kind of over the spring this year, kind of looking at older tonnage. Can we actually convert older tonnage to new fuel types? Or what can we do to make them CII compliance over a longer time? So what we're working on is how can we utilize technology? How can we take that steps forward? And how much are we willing to invest on CapEx and OpEx to actually to move the bar, so to speak, and what is an economical, feasible solution for a vessel of an older age? At the same time, we see there's a new fleet coming in. And we need to train that. We need to train those, and that's where kind of where I think the digitalization comes into as an effect on how we set up, how we drive compliance, how we drive team collaboration, what kind of simulators can we have, what kind of way can we train people differently than we've done in the past. So I see it as a possibility where we have a number of options to how we can solve the challenges.
I mean, you've touched on a very, very important point there, Olav, because if you know, you've got to balance this whole issue of, you know, driving forward for a goal, a 2030 or a 2050 emissions goal, where you've got new ships coming in, and that's fine, you know. And we heard on, and I'm going to give it a plug for the LSW breakfast radio, which is on at 7 o'clock every morning, and you can get it on the homepage of the website. But Andy Dacey from JP Morgan was saying this morning on the radio show that, you know, he's just ordered 2 methanol powered vessels and what have you. So you've got that element there where the industry is moving forward. You've also got ships that are 5-10 years old who've got another 15 years of life left in them. You've also got ships that are being ordered today, a year ago, that are going to be in service in 2050, 2030 and 2035, that aren't going to necessarily become compliant or in line with what the market wants. And it is square in that circle, isn't it? It is how do you actually achieve what you want when you're dealing with an industry that is fragmented in as far as the type of tonnage and the vessels that we're talking about is concerned? What are your thoughts?
We mentioned earlier on, but you need to collaborate with a number of players in the market to actually achieve what you want to achieve, and you can't do all this alone. You have to find, you know, you have to work in a more what I call a collaborative way, maybe a more ecosystem approach to this whole thing about, you know, you need to get the ports lined up, we need to get the infrastructure for the fuel types are coming up, we need to kind of deal with all at the same time. You need to kind of handle both old and new fuel types or old and new energy sources. You need to handle a vessel that is less instrumented and less monitored than the newer fleet. So as a ship manager of today, we need to find that balance. And we need to embark on part of that through working internally on training people to work on different aspects of it. We need also to use kind of what kind of tools do you have available. And the other part, there isn't, I think kind of the business is the right word, but there are more development going on different part of the industry that we need to look after and kind of manage and maybe insert ourselves into, because it's something interesting. This is a solution we can look for example, for how do you effectively manage the vessels when it comes to monitoring real time? Do we really need to monitor every vessel real time, or can we manage to a lesser degree? What are the options to monitoring a vessel real time, and what kind of data do you actually want to harness to help you making efficient decision making? Because that's the other part of it. You need to be efficient in your decision making. You can't kind of rely on stomach feeling anymore. You need to get more data. At the same time, not every vessel will have that ability to give you the data you actually need on decision making. But you have to work on both those aspects in the old-fashioned way, looking after the vessels you have, and explore the opportunities that you and the possibilities lays out there to how you can drive efficiency through that chain, particularly with newer fuels coming in.
I want to just ask some of the questions that are coming through from the audience and the delegates here, Olav. One question: how can ship owners and managers support their crew onwards towards sort of decarbonisation? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's a lot involved in this whole decarb debate, but what are your thoughts?
First of all, it's the kind of the hardware part of decarbonization, kind of choosing new fuel types, choosing different ways of operating. So I think what we can help and train people in is kind of to get them to understand what the really difference is, in a sense that how do you optimize on less emissions? What need to be in place? So you need to have a training. You need to bring people along. And I think I'm coming back to digitalization, for a better word for looking at it, because the easy part is the hardware or the software you need to install to actually help you. The difficult part is or more challenging part is to bring people along so they can make the right decisions. Because there isn't a dashboard that give you, okay, do this, do that. Of course, we're going to automate a lot of those. We're going to take repetitive tasks, take them out of the way, but there still need to be decision making. And that means you need to rely on new data, new information. You need to make that decision out there. Of course, with the support. So that whole part of train people in new technology through being simulators, through being more efficient training, through be more kind of be part of the development itself are the three elements we're looking at.
Right, brilliant, Olav. And one final question here. Comes from Shane Biggie. What is your strategy to help owners continuously reduce their CII rating over the coming years? There is so much you can do with energy saving devices. You know, what's next? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's why I briefly mentioned the project we're running for an older tonnage to look at, okay, what are the options? And the option comes along, how much can you invest in that part of it, in monitoring, in data collection, in decision-making system, and kind of the other part also, how do you, because the vessel is also managed by the operators, eh? So you have to play together to achieve that. And then some of the vessels can achieve a lot with small investment in kind of optimizing the pumps on board, the electrical motors, there's a lot of small things you can do, but at the end of the day, it comes to a stop. But it also kind of how you manage that vessel through optimization together with the operators. And when you're looking at from a perspective for, then that's why you will see a lot of solutions out there kind of opting or kind of working on that elements. How do you do that? How you route your vessels? How much what is your ballast leg? What is your cargo, the larder leg, and all that? All that's kind of, it's something that you need to do together with the owner operator of the vessels.
Okay, well, Olav, I just want to say thank you very much indeed for your time today. You know, we just have a little. I think we just had another question come through. Actually, I'm going to ask you one last question that's come through. What would you need for decision making in the future? What about a digital twin? I mean, this is quite an interesting scenario.
You can build, digital twin has been there for a while, and I think kind of it will be interesting to build a digital twin in a sense of what kind of ecosystem you want to build it around. But it is a tool that's available. It's been there for a while, and we haven't explored that in this context as I've seen. And I think that is the other part of it. Okay, you have to explore that. How much efficiently that's going to be, I'm not so sure about. But it's used in all the industry. Oil and gas industry is using it. So why should we use it in marine? I think it's something we need to explore and look into.
Well, Olav, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. I do appreciate it. Very good to talk to you. And please stay on listening to the webinar, but do appreciate your time today. And just for the listeners and for the delegates, today's debate is being recorded, and it will be you will be able to download it, listen to it at your leisure from the Ship Management International website in about a day or so's time. But Olav, for the time being, thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. Right, for our panel, and we're running a couple of minutes late, but it's not a problem. Can I call up Raal Harris, who is Chief Creative Officer at Ocean Technologies Group, Heidi Heseltine, founder of the Diversity Study Group, and Henrik Jensen, who is CEO of Danica Marine Services. Oh, here we are. All perfect. There we go. Excellent. This is an awful lot easier than doing a face-to-face conference. You just summon people and they're there immediately in front of you. It's great. So welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking about, again, one of the other pillars there being the recruitment and skills element, and that this is so pivotal. And what are the challenges and the opportunities they face in the industry? Look, I'm going to go left to right here. Raal, you're on the left-hand side here. What are your thoughts? Just in the sort of, I want to give you, if you can give me a little 1 or 2 minute policy statement viewpoint on this whole issue, and I'll do that for everybody, and then we'll go into the questions. But Raal, over to you. Just a minute or so.
Sure. Thanks, Sean, and thanks for having me here. It's great to be able to join this forum. I think we're in a bit of a crossroads as an industry in terms of how we move forward, and I think there's a bit of a growing recognition that what's got us to this point over many centuries really may not be what sort of takes us into the future. And of course, decarbonisation, we talked about that this morning already, but it's of course the big immovable object, because we've got to meet those targets on a sort of mission or even species critical level, so we cannot underestimate the sort of impact that that's going to have on the seafarer skills stuff. And we'll no doubt get into that a little bit, but moving to multi-fuel types in a relatively short space of time. And on the, I'm a member of the Just Transition Task Force Peer Learning Group. So we've been working on looking at the impact of those skills. Give you some numbers: 450,000 needing some additional training by 2030, rising to about 800,000 by the mid-2030. So there's a huge amount of learning that needs to go on in a relatively short space of time. But also we can't look at that in isolation. So it's not just about switching, one fuel out for another. it's digitalization, big part of that, and digitalization, I say rather than digitization, because that's it's not just about moving something into a spreadsheet. There's a whole bunch of sort of software infrastructure and everything that has to come into play. And of course, from a skills perspective, you're looking at sort of digital literacy, manufacturer training in the software applications that run all this sort of stuff. And it's not just our industry that's changing as well. The world is changing, and there's new generations who have different expectations of who they want to work for, who they want to shop with. We can maybe get into that a little bit today. Mark mentioned ESG at the top, and he kind of said pretty much everything I was going to say about it. But I think we've not really appreciated how much impact this could potentially have, and what an opportunity it is really to transform sort of how we work and ultimately do business in a better way. And what that implies for me is that we need to look at the whole organization and consider a much wider learning and development strategy that supports the organizational goals. And that's on board the ships and at shore as well.
Raal, thank you very much. I mean, it's frightening statistics there, but we'll come on to that in a second once we hear from Heidi and then Henrik. Heidi, coming on to you. Hi, good morning to you. And welcome to London International Shipping Week and the ISSS debate. Do you want to give us your little 2-minute perspective on this whole issue of the challenges and opportunities facing the industry as far as recruitment is concerned?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Sean. And I think, I'd echo a lot of what Raal's already said. So rather than repeat, I think we have a lot of challenges, but I also think that presents a lot of opportunity. I think from my perspective, one of the key things is we can't afford to be complacent. And I think as shipping, when it comes to our people, quite often there is complacency. We historically are not always the most forward thinking, and it's points that you've also raised, Sean. You have some organizations who are really progressive, who are leading the way, and we see some great work being done. That's not always the majority. And of course, then you have, as you've said as well, you've got the people at the other end of the scale, and that's looking at people at sea and at shore as well. I think that we know we need new skills. We know we need to be bringing in new people, new mindsets, new skills into the industry, but that's not at the expense of those who are already in the industry. So I think that one of our challenges as well is about integrating the people that we do have and the people who are coming in. How do we blend a huge amount of shipping knowledge and shipping experience, which is vital to the work that we do, and essentially make that work in harmony with some of those new skills and talent that we've got coming in and that we need to attract? Because what we don't want is to bring new people into the industry and attract them in, and then to have the wrong environments, the wrong working cultures for them, because we haven't invested, we haven't set up the culture to support it, and then have them leave, because that would be even more disruptive, I think. So I think that needs to be really taken into consideration as well. And also looking at what skills and experience do we need. We've spoken about the challenges of technology. Are we ready for it? Do companies know? Are they thinking ahead of who they want to hire and where they're going to find those people from? Because in my experience, hiring is quite reactive. Normally, people want someone that they wanted to get to start yesterday. But when it comes to certainly in these areas, you can't afford to be reactive. You need to be thinking ahead. So I think those are some of the key topics I would put out there, and sort of like the headlines for people to consider.
I mean, you've raised on a couple of aspects there, with the challenges of technology. And I think, the young people coming into the industry that we're trying to attract, are going to be used to, playing with these and their iPads and their tablets and whatever, and they're going to want the same, and they're going to want to have that connectivity. They're going to want to be able to believe that they're in an industry that's very akin to working from ashore as well. And then I want to come on a little bit later on to diversity. There's not enough women in shipping industry, and also right the way across the board throughout the employment chain as well. So there's a lot of things there that can be done. But I will come on to those in a second. Henrik, let me bring you in now, if I may. You've certainly got an expertise there on supplying crew into the industry, and has certainly been affected through the Ukraine situation over the last year or so. But let me pass over the microphone to you just for 2 minutes on your policy position statement on it.
Thank you very much, Sean, for that me joining here. Yeah, I think as Raal already mentioned, or you mentioned also that we are at a crossroad, but maybe a long crossroad, because this process of new fuels and so on will still take a decade, I think. But actually, when you look back on it, maybe there will be new fuels, there will be complete new ways to propel ships. And actually, maybe we are looking at shipping revolutions, like when the Vikings got the idea of putting sails on the ships and they reached Northern America. So maybe it is really something heavy happening, I think. And yeah, crew shortages, yes, there is a crew shortage, but I think it's much more specific than, let's say, it's put up in many places. Yeah, for the positive things, I see that there.
Henrik, you put yourself on mute. You need to unmute.
Sorry, I put it.
Yeah,
carry on. I don't know where I got out then, but I say there's a crew shortage for sure. Yeah, but it's not a general one. It's much more specific, I think. And one of the positive things we have is that actually young people, particularly in India and the Philippines, are still interested in joining the industry. And hopefully that will continue, but I think it will not continue automatically. So we have really to take care that we put the industry up as a good place to work. Yeah. And in that case, actually, I got shared a survey made by PwC, the big auditing company, who asked the 52,000 employees worldwide what is important for them. And the first point was that they had a fair salary compared to the jobs, and the gender and what the other colleagues was done. And the second one was actually that they worked on modern technology. So that is maybe a problem for us when we move on. We are building ships today, which will last for the next 25 years. Yeah, even with double cabins for the ratings and common facilities, toilet facilities, and so on. That's really be a challenge, I think, for these ship owners. But another thing is, of course, when I said the crew shortage is more specific, is that it is actually the senior ranks which are difficult. Yeah, and maybe again not by numbers, but by, I think it was Neil who mentioned that Mark O'Neill mentioned that it's the competencies. I mean, maybe the people are there by numbers, but the competencies, yeah. And also, I think for the future, the requirements will change. Yeah. So when the AI gets on board and all the automation gets on board, we will move from being the crew on board will move from being operators to be observers. Yeah. And to be observer, you need a different personality to understand what situation awareness actually, to understand what goes around, what happens around you. So that is maybe, and then I think also there's one special thing for the maritime industry, which we're not thinking about. And I think René said we should advertise when we take young people in that there's opportunities ashore. And that's actually creating a problem, because we are in a normal company, you have a sort of pyramid, yeah, where there are many candidates to be for the senior positions one day to be promoted. But in the shipping, we have only 1/3 officer to be promoted later to captain for each captain we have. So that pipeline is not right, maybe. So yeah, the ESG, which is for the crewing, then the S letter, I guess, is of course important. Yeah. And I think nobody here in this panel and the speakers had the problem, but actually in Danica we are making a survey every year about seafarers, how you feel, what they do, and so on. And 20% of them are saying that they are not paid on time. I mean, so the long book from InterManager is good with all the things there, but there is still some way to go for somebody at least. Yeah. So that is of course not. And it's also not helping the intake of the industry, that we have piracy, we are polluting industry, and so on. When young people comes and the technology and this, that is a challenge, I think, when we look ahead. Yeah. And yeah. Okay. And about the salaries and so on, the ESD is of course good, or the ESD is good, yeah. But it is really for the senior officers, for the competent senior officers, it is their market. They can pick the jobs they want, actually. So that's the thing we have to deal with. And then doesn't help that we're not paying them on time and so on, of course. And yeah, that's
all right. Well, Henry,
yeah.
Let me develop the debate on that now. And can I ask all the panelists just to unmute yourselves and please be rude and just interrupt. You know, stick your hand up and say, "Oh, well, you know, I want to make a point," and what have you. You know, we've heard some interesting points here. We've heard, you know, about the impending shortage, 56,000 seafarers by mid 2030s. You know, 800,000 seafarers needing training, and what these are stark figures here. You know, my mind goes back to 2008, 2009, when there was all this poaching going on, and wages were going up. And what was it? A Filipino LNG captain was on 7 times the salary of his national president, or something. It was ridiculous. These are worrying issues here. Raal, let me throw it over to you, and please, Heidi and Henrik, stick your hand up, and I will get you to come in on this. These are worrying issues now moving forward, aren't they, for the industry in recruiting and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we've bounced around a lot of different topics that are obviously all intertwined, you know. So I mean, the thing I would say, you mentioned the worrying statistics. From my point of view, my sort of journey with this began around the time of the last LISW, when I was putting together my sort of speech for that, you know, and that's when I started to think about the people, you know, aspect of the decarbonisation. And then there were some fantastic speeches in the course of that week. Paddy Rogers was hugely inspirational and stuff, you know, talking about what we needed to do ahead of us. And I started sort of mentally working backwards, because my background is in, for those that don't know, you know, 20 years of making maritime e-learning, really. So you're taking a problem, working out what skills you're going to need, or whatever, what knowledge, you know, work, and making sure that that's ready in time to align with legislation that comes in. So you start sort of working backwards and start saying, well, if we're gonna have the training in place in time for those 2030, you know, targets, you've got, you know, when do I need to start to make it, you know, to make sense of it? And we've started too late, fundamentally. You know, there was way too much chatter about which fuel was going to win. We now know no fuel is going to win. There's going to be a mix, because apart from anything else, availability is going to be crucial. So, you know, we're already a bit too late, in my view, but there is a good effort now in place to sort of make some updates to SCCW, and to, you know, there's some great initiatives coming out of Singapore as well, and in the UK Skills Commission as well. So, you know, people are doing it, and the important thing is the standards, because without the standards, without global standards, it's going to be very, very difficult for anyone to have confidence, particularly port states who are accepting ships in full of ammonia, and if they don't don't have some globally agreed standards, that's going to get very sticky for all of us, and it's not what we want. So we must move faster on that. And then the pipeline issue, you know, what was mentioned there, I think that's again a very difficult something very difficult for individual companies to try and solve. You know, they need to pick up a general appetite for our profession. And they can't stimulate that appetite on their own. They can become better employers, and they can attract people from that pool, but creating a bigger pool is going to be very, very difficult. So, I mean, I don't want to hug the limelight, and Heidi will have much more intelligent things to say about this than I will. But really, I think if we start to look at all the different, the kinds of businesses that we need to be to attract the talent in, and start working on being better businesses and being much more kind of bold and much more ambitious in terms of what we want to do for people, I think that will ultimately lead to us generating that pipeline of talent.
Thanks, Raal. Heidi, let's bring you in on that. There's a very good point that Raal made there, actually. It is about being seen to be the right type of business that people want to go and work for. You know, what are your thoughts? Is shipping doing that? Are we good at it?
No. We're not, bluntly. On the whole, as I said, you're always going to get some organisations who are, so it's a sweeping statement. I get quite concerned sometimes at events where there's a lot of lip service paid. I think there's some really good headlines. Once you start lifting the lid, I'd be really interested in seeing what goes underneath. So the answer is I don't think so. And I think we talk a lot about the need to attract more, and I think that's important. Why aren't we working harder to retain who we've got as well? That's a massive part of this. And so I think for me, it's also critical that we understand, why aren't we retaining? We know post-COVID that there were quite a few people. It accelerated the pace of people leaving the industry. We know that the maritime industry has changed an awful lot, and that for seafarers quite often it's not as attractive. And I appreciate Henrik's point that actually in certain areas it's still attractive. But we do have a predicted shortage, and that might be in certain areas, but we still have a predicted shortage. I think that the nod to the fact, and I think you've mentioned it, Sean, as well, I'm a female in shipping. I don't want to hold back anybody of any background coming into shipping, but we're also 98% male dominated. So we need to consider the environments we're giving the males on board the ships, as well as bringing in anybody else from any other background and making it work. So for me, I think we know that we're going to have to be ready for the technology, and I agree with Raal. There's too many different types of technology. What are we training for? We've got to go broad brushstrokes at this stage. We can't funnel it down. They're simply not really able to yet.
Well, in some cases, we don't know what it is yet.
No, we don't. So we've got to take a slightly more pragmatic approach based on the reality of our situation. But why not upskill? And not just in the hard skills, in the soft skills. I think it's really important as well for me that we're emphasizing the soft skills, because that's where we're actually seeing some really good progress being made, is where the soft skills and leadership skills and accountability for others is really being honed in on as well. So I think it's a mix, but I think as well as sometimes the decarbonisation and the technology is almost a red herring, I believe, to some of the core challenges we have when it comes to our people.
Henrik, do you have any comments? Let me bring you in on this.
Yeah, of course. I think that the training, about 800,000 has to be trained, is correct. Yeah, but it's over a decade at least. It's not in 1 week. And I'm sure Raal will get his. First, we need to get the legislation and the rules in place, what they have to be trained in and what it is, and then I'm sure Raal and his people will be able to do that. That's not worrying me actually. But we have one problem when we talk about training here in the industry also, is that some ship owners, some managers are training, but a lot of people are actually a lot of other owners and managers are just sitting and thinking, instead of training, it's easier to steal somebody from the plotting stage,
Yeah.
And that's not fair actually. But that's how it is. And I would say for training also, we have owners which do a lot of training. It's great. But I also see one point there, when the charter market now we have to make the crew budgets for next year, and the charter markets in most places are nice. The training is allowed, but as soon as the charter market make a dip, the first thing which goes out of the budget is the training actually. Do we need that, and so on? So training is, because it cannot be measured actually. Maybe the problem for the training is it cannot be measured what the effects are of it. Yeah. So that's it. But I think for training, really one problem is that we are stealing from each other, and that should be brought up by higher standard in the STCW convention, I guess.
Can I, Sean, before we move on from that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out something that Heidi mentioned there, which I think is really important as well, about not leaving people behind. We have a workforce out there, and in some cases, and Henrik will know this, it's the age profiles are actually going up. So people like me talk a lot about millennials and Generation Z and how they're changing the workplace. There's a lot of older people still there. And with digital literacy being one of those core foundational things that we're going to need, we are going to have to think about how we approach that. And working with people who in some cases have very low educational attainment to begin with. So they don't maybe have the sort of skills that make it easy for them to be autodidact, to take care of their own learning and to put their hands up for where they can find resources and so on. So I think those are foundational pieces that we have to address as well, moving towards how do we kind of upskill people and how do we make sure that we take these people with us on this journey that we're all on as an industry. And then just one other point that was there about attracting people in, and I think that this, we talked about people poaching. That's always been about money. And I'm not saying that money won't be one of the, always be maybe the dominant factor, but there's some interesting studies at the moment coming through to come back to some of the newer generations about choosing things like a better fit with my values than being compensation, being the most forefront thing at their minds. And so this is another thing that we really need to understand. People have a different value system as they're coming through in the world today. They care about different things. Give you another couple of statistics. When you look at which nationalities have the biggest climate fear amongst their young population. The number one is the Philippines, and number two is India. And these are our big seafarer supply countries. So we also have a massive ability to be able to say to people, you can make a difference here. We're on this great journey that will actually sort of transform not just the shipping industry, but the world, you know. So we've got to play to our strengths too.
But I think
Henrik,
just to say here, many are talking about the benefits and how we treat the people, and of course how we treat the people, but the benefits that you have a medical insurance, that you have the training benefits and all this. But I want to come back to this PwC survey and also our experiences. When there are 2 job offers for each seaman, when you talk about the competent senior officers, then all the other places must be in. But if your salaries are not par to the market, you have no chances to retain your crew. So salaries is, when we have such a high shortage in certain areas, then the salaries is counting a lot.
And the other thing, I think,
Heidi, go ahead. Heidi. And Heidi, I'm going to also come in. There's a question from Despina, which we've got about 5 minutes left. But Heidi, you go ahead, and then I'm going to ask you a question in a minute.
Very quick point. I think the other thing we need to think about is that people, and one of the things we see, so we through the All Aboard Alliance, some of the research we've been doing there as well in particular, and I think coming through some of the charities as well, is when you look at the challenges among seafarers, there's a myriad of things which I won't go into, but actually having career potential is a really big thing, and it's a career potential that spans sea to shore. So there's an increasing number of individuals who want to know that if I'm going to enter into this, and it's quite gnarly at the moment, you know, if I'm going to come into this relatively gnarly sector, which is hopefully improving, what's in this for me in the long term? And you're right, it's not about the money. That plays a part, of course, but it's where do I see myself in the future? So that's something we've got to consider.
So Heidi, we've had a question in from Despina, and Despina's on the panel at about 11:35 with Bob. Do you believe that our industry may have made a mistake by not sufficiently promoting technology to attract young talent? As a result, have we consequently lost this talent to other sectors? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, hi Despina. I think overall our industry makes a mistake by not promoting itself. First and foremost, I think that lots of conversations, we're not good enough at doing it. We're trying to do more, and that's that collaboration we've been talking about. I think we need to harness that more. And I think absolutely, I think we need to be considering what will make this an attractive sector. What do we need to promote more? And the opportunities that lie within it, very much technology. Absolutely, we need to be promoting it. I don't think it's too late. People change industries, and if you look at people of the future, one of the things that we know about, you know, younger generations coming through, they're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to change. They're going to go through more jobs than we probably have ever done ourselves or will do, and that's okay. We can harness the benefits of that through that. But yeah, absolutely, it's something we should be considering.
Brilliant. Anybody else want to have the last word? We've got about a minute left. Raal, any other comments you want to make?
No, I think I've probably talked too much.
Okay, and Henrik, are you okay?
I would say the same as Raal for myself.
It's been, these sort of debates could go on for hours, and it's excellent when you get a good panel like we've got today. You're all feeding off each other with different viewpoints. I think
I can say one thing actually, Sean. We didn't talk about too much about diversity, but I think that's even such a big topic. It's for a conference or itself, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it is absolutely, you know, and I think you know, when we hold this again in 2 years' time, we want to be talking about real changes and improvements as far as that is concerned, as far as this industry, as far as shipping is concerned. Can I thank you all very, very much indeed for this morning? Excellent. I just love debates like this. It makes my job a lot easier when you get really good panelists like yourselves. I do appreciate it. As I said to and to our delegates who are still hanging in there, and I do appreciate it. And there's a lot to take on board. But the debate today has been videotaped, and it will be on the Ship Management International website in the next day or so. So you can get all your colleagues as well to listen into it as well. But for the time being, Raal, Heidi, and Henrik, thank you very much indeed. If I could very rudely ask you to turn your cameras off, and then I'll invite John Trenchard up now. And John is UK Supply Chain Director for DP World UK. And John, you're going to talk a little bit about the sort of chain interface, driving and efficiency and sustainability. Do you need anything from me? Do you want to? You can share the screen should you so wish, but it's entirely up to you.
I'm afraid you've got my face and what comes out. So
Brilliant.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. So I'll turn my camera off and mute. So you've got about 15 minutes or so, sir. That'd be lovely.
Okay, super, excellent. The title that I've been given today to talk about is Supply Chain Interface, Driving Efficiency and Sustainability. I'm delighted to be able to speak today at the International Shipowning and Ship Management Summit as part of London International Shipping Week. Just by way of introduction, my name is John Trenchard, and I'm VP for Commercial and Supply Chain at DP World Ports and Terminals in the UK. As some background information, I've lived and worked in a variety of supply chain roles for the past 20 years in the Netherlands, Denmark, Chile, China, and the United States, and for the last 3 years with DP World in the United Kingdom. So in my work with DP World, my core focus is providing customers capabilities to support international maritime supply chains servicing the UK economy. And there's an increasing focus on providing customers with solutions that are more efficient, sustainable, and emit lower carbon emissions. Being asked to talk today about supply chain interface, well, this is exactly the function of ports, linking maritime transport with land modes, road and rail, providing efficient options for physical operation, data visibility and exchange, and economic supply chain handovers. In the UK, DP World operates 2 major logistics hubs at London Gateway and Southampton, 2 of the country's most important gateways for deep-sea containerized maritime trade to and from the UK. Locations are key in providing customers efficient options to access world markets. Both of our logistics hubs provide access to the world's most efficient container vessels, maximizing opportunities for UK importers and exporters. To support our traditional container terminal operations, we are increasingly looking to provide seamless end-to-end services to our customers, supporting options for maritime vessel operations, warehouse and inventory, and finally to the customer door. In the past year, we've gone to great lengths to enhance our customer offering through sustainability. And I'm pleased to say this has led to DP World in the UK to celebrate its greenest year ever. And that's exactly what I aim to talk to you about in my short time with you all today. So at DP World in the UK, one of our key ambitions is to become a leading sustainable provider of global end-to-end supply chain solutions in the country. At least in our journey towards sustainability, we've adopted a 4-step approach, which is number 1, to have a decarbonisation strategy and to measure CO2. Number 2, to decarbonise our own operations. Number 3, to provide lower carbon power supply for supply chain partners using our infrastructure and facilities. And number 4, offering lower carbon options for our customers. So in regard to number 1, having a decarbonisation strategy and measuring CO2, we've engaged with Lloyd's Register Quality Assurance to measure our Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions. And this gives us a baseline and allows us to prioritise projects, and there's all number of projects, as part of a decarbonisation roadmap. Now, in 2015, the approximate amount of CO2 per container imported into the UK through Southampton and then full cycle handled with its empty evacuation was around about 55 kilos of CO2 per container. As I'm sitting here today, where we're operating without diesel and looking to electrify as much things as possible here in Southampton, we've got that down to about 7 kilograms per container. We're not there yet, but we're on the journey, and we need to work and move forward a bit further with this. In terms of decarbonising our own operations, at Berth 4 at London Gateway, we've just invested over £350 million in providing strategic capacity to handle the world's most efficient container ships, up to 24,000 TEU vessels, so that they can optimize sailing efficiencies. I think it's important here to say that the most efficient container ship afloat today is a 24,000 TEU container ship with 24,000 containers on it. And the least efficient container ship afloat today is a 24,000 container ship with 1 container on it. So optimization and utilization is really important in making sure that we get these efficiencies. Our investment will be operated entirely by electric. making it one of the most sustainable berths ever built. We serviced by a fleet of 12 new electric straddle carriers, which are able to operate for up to 4 hours without needing to be recharged. And when required, the battery can be charged in just 45 minutes. Each straddle carrier will reduce carbon emissions by 54% compared with non-electric models. And this figure of improvement will increase over time as London Gateway continues its transition to a zero carbon electricity supply. Interestingly, however, our greenest year ever in 2022 has been largely driven by our adoption of hydro-treated vegetable oil at our Southampton operations. This is a renewable biodiesel that is 100% sustainably sourced. 2023 will be the first year in which we've used HVO for a full 12 months, and the expected absolute reduction in carbon emissions is about 90% compared with 2021-22. We also estimate that this switch from diesel to HVO saves around 14,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide annually, the equivalent of taking more than 8,000 family cars off the roads. Well, it's important to note that HVO is not the final solution, it's just an interim position. It's already resulted in the significant net carbon emission reductions which otherwise would not have been possible. We're also now actively looking to see how we can accelerate the use of photovoltaic cells where possible to support renewable energy usage at our facilities. In terms of providing electrical power for our supply chain partners, this is an important pillar moving forward. And here we're investing in electrical charging points for electric container trucks, a new truck gate investment at Southampton. And we're also investigating possibilities for shoreside power for vessels, although there are some significant challenges within this area, and many of you will be aware of. What is interesting at present is the fourth area, offering lower carbon options for our customers. Efficient port operations essentially allow our shipping line customers the ability to steam as efficiently as possible on their scheduled line of services. With 1 tonne of heavy fuel oil emitting around 3 tonnes of CO2 when combusted, port operations are critical to minimising total fuel burn. Fuel curves are obviously different for different vessels under various parameters. However, with fuel consumption rates of over 40 tonnes a day not uncommon, the maths for inefficient CO2 emissions by overly fast vessel steaming become very, very big very quickly. With IMO 2023 and the EU emission trading scheme now phasing in, maximising efficiency of port calls is key. I'd like to talk a little bit about not the wet side, but the dry side and modal shift. And as some background, rail continues to be an essential part of the British supply chain, especially our logistics hubs, connecting international shipping to the heart of British inland trade. This is reflected in the government's long-term ambition to move freight off-road and onto rail. We recognise the vital importance of strong rail and port connectivity, which has led them to actively encourage a modal shift. At DP World in Southampton, we've taken that sentiment and run with it in an effort to align our operations with the government's sustainability ambitions. At the start of the month, we launched the Modal Shift programme, offering customers a direct financial incentive to move their containerised import goods off the road and onto rail. Now, this is a trial that will run for 12 months and is funded by a relatively small modal shift fee for importers for containers through the container terminal. If an import container moves to a railhead within 140 miles of the port, there's an incentive of £70 per container. If an import container moves to a railhead beyond 140 miles from the port, the port will refund the £10 fee. By helping incentivise short route rail to suppliers, which is normally dominated by HGV trucks, we have developed the potential to prevent an estimated 30,000 tonnes of CO2 being emitted per year from downstream transport activity, which is more than 3 times the total emissions of our port operations at Southampton. Now, we don't know if this is going to work, but this is a chance to optimise infrastructure which already exists in the UK, and it doesn't need a technology change to make this work. It's a tested demand side pull to see if we can make a difference in behaviour and see if supply chain partners want to lean in and see if rail can be more of the solution for their UK distribution. While the share of rail transport has declined over the last few years, our modal shift program has been designed to increase the proportion of our terminal freight being moved by rail up towards around 40% by the end of 2025. And as a result, the intent is that we will naturally ease traffic congestion at the Southampton logistics hub and lead to significant carbon reduction. But this modal shift program is by no means the lone effort in our push for increased sustainability. Last year, we launched a weekly rail service connecting our two terminals at London Gateway and Southampton, taking up to 120 lorries a week off the roads and cutting carbon emissions for that journey corridor by 80%. And as a result of our collective rail movements between London Gateway and Southampton to the whole of the UK, approximately 300,000 trucks are taken off UK roads each year. In conclusion, there's still a lot that we need to learn about the journey to net zero for the logistics and the international shipping sectors. However, what we do know is that if we are going to get there, organisations like ours need to play our part. I'm pleased to be able to say that we are doing that, and we'll certainly be doing more year on year. As a leading provider of global end-to-end supply chain solutions, sustainability is not just the latest fad or trend that we have to cater for. It plays a leading role in our operations. And we understand that businesses across the UK want to benefit from new markets, trends and initiatives, especially when it comes to sustainability. And that's why we've gone to such great lengths to embrace this area. But the fact of the matter is, taking the sustainability steps towards net zero will be the most important part in mitigating risk in the market for the future. Thankfully, DP World in the UK is already learning that sustainability not only helps mitigate risk, but also gives us a competitive advantage, offering our customers the sustainable infrastructure they simply just cannot access elsewhere. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant, John. Thank you very much. And it's really good to get an insight into what's been happening. And as far as DP World is concerned, you are the world's largest port operator, and certainly are joining in on that push there for doing your bit as far as decarbonisation is concerned. I'm now going to do a very strange handover, and thank you, John. Do appreciate that. And as I said to delegates and to listeners, today's debate is being recorded, so you can actually also get your colleagues to listen in as well. But thank you very much indeed, John, for your time this morning. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Bob Jakes, editor of Ship Management International, who will now look after this last section of today's summit. And just to sort of say to delegates, you are in for a treat after the panel. You have a treat during the panel as well. But also Martin Stopford, who's an acclaimed maritime economist, will give his perspective on the markets and the view and how he sees those being sort of affected by everything that's going on at the moment. And that'll be in a fireside chat with Bob. But I'm now going to hand over to Bob Jakes, who will take over. So Bob, over to you.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm delighted to be joining this fascinating debate. Although, of course, I have the unenviable task of following Sean, who I think you'll all agree has done an excellent job moderating so far. But of course, he needs a break. And I think we heard that you've been up since 7, Sean, doing the radio program. So enjoy some downtime. So as you heard, I'm going to be moderating a panel on digitalization and efficiency. And I'd like to ask my panelists to switch on their cameras, please. And these panelists are, well, you can see already Hans Bobeldijk, who is the CEO of Online. We have Despina Theodisio, who is the CEO of Tototheo Maritime, and also the immediate past president of Wister International. And we have David Tropp Hag, who is a VP at KVH Industries. I'm going to ask them all to say a little bit more about themselves and their companies by way of an immediate introduction. But first up, let me just comment that we've already heard a lot about digitalization. Our kickoff keynote mentioned it as a key tool for optimization. Then later we had Olav mentioning that you can't rely on gut feeling anymore, you need data. But perhaps the most relevant quote came from René Kofod-Olsen, who said, digitalization is going at such a speed not a lot of us realize. Well, for those of you that don't realize, listen up, because we have some excellent experts to tell us all about it. So, David, can I begin by asking you to, just in a minute or so, introduce yourself and your company? Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Bob. My name is David Tropp Hag. As mentioned, I'm the VP of Sales for KVH Industries in the EMEA region. I've been with KVH for a little over 20 years, dealing through that time with vessel connectivity and delivery of content to vessels. And basically, that's what KVH does. We deliver and we build internet connectivity and network management solutions for vessels. So that's a little bit about us.
Thank you. And continuing in alpha order, Despina.
Good morning. Thank you, Bob. My name is Despina Panagiotou-Theodosiou. I'm the co-CEO of Theodosio Maritime, which is a group of companies that offer services globally, specializing in satellite communications and maritime technology solutions. And of course, our main focus is on optimizing vessel and fleet performance. I have been with the group for about 18 years, and I'm very happy to be joining this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Despina. And perhaps you could just mention your connection with Colombia. We heard from Mark O'Neill, and I think he mentioned the performance optimization control room. I believe your company played a key role in installing that.
Initially, when, of course, Colombia started building it, Theodosio was there to assist. We are partners with Colombia for many, many years, starting with satellite communications and other services, of course. And indeed, we have been on this journey with them as well on digitalization.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Hans.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Hans Bobeldijk, CEO of UAB Online, and UAB Online is market leader in the ARA region, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Antwerp region, in optimizing the pre-arrival till departure process by providing a collaboration, communication, and data exchange platform.
Okay, great. So without further ado, let's move on to our questions. And first up, connectivity. Well, reliable and accessible satellite communications are obviously absolutely critical for shipping's digitalization and smooth ship-to-shore operations, as well as seafarer welfare. How is the shipping industry progressing in this respect? David?
I think the industry is very much at the mercy of technology innovations from the satellite operator side and the antenna manufacturers. Industry is adopting new technology as it comes along, and right now we're in a day and age where we're taking quantum leaps in terms of available bandwidth, and ship owners are actually adapting that as it comes on. Of course, there is risk aversion, and they want to test out solutions before sort of jumping in. But progress is happening all the time. And I would say these days we're actually closing the gap between sea and shore connectivity much more than has ever been the case. I mean, it used to be widening, but I think in reality it's actually narrowing now.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned bandwidth, but how about affordability?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. New technology is delivering more megabytes at a lower dollar per megabyte rate. So you can either get more connectivity for your same budget, or you can get the same connectivity for a lower budget.
Okay, great. Thank you. Despina, can we move on to you?
Yes, of course. Connectivity is certainly going to be a key player in the evolution of shipping and in delivering the zero carbon future that the shipping community is committed to. So while we explore all these new and innovative technologies, I believe that connectivity will be the driving force behind their effective implementation. I agree with David. We are progressing really well. We're in a very good position right now. the maritime industry has heavily relied on satellite communications for connectivity. So there is availability and reliability of services, but we also see now new services like technologies like the low Earth orbit satellites, the LEO satellites that promise to revolutionize the connectivity that we have. They provide lower latency, they provide higher data rates, so offering more affordable and reliable options for maritime communication. We also have the integration of 4G and 5G technologies that has expanded connectivity options. And what we see now, at least with our customers, is that they're very much interested in hybrid solutions. So that means adopting connectivity solutions that combine GEO and LEO satellites together with 4G or 5G connectivity. I think this approach optimizes connectivity by selecting the most suitable network based on the vessel's location and communication needs at any time.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is pretty technical stuff, but as I understand it, the geostationary satellites sit above the equator, but they don't give very good coverage at the poles, whereas the low Earth orbiters, the LEOs, go over the poles. So is that right? So you basically have more global coverage?
There are satellite operators that are geo and cover the poles, like Iridium, but I would say that geo satellite operators are doing much better in that sense right now. But I think having LEO satellites as well is what provides the lower latency and what helps drive the costs a little bit further down.
Okay, thank you. And when you talk about hybrid solutions, that would also mean there's a built-in degree of redundancy and therefore higher reliability, I would assume, if they have access to several satellite networks. If one should go down for whatever reason, they have backups. Is that correct?
Of course, from what we see from our customers and what we discuss with them, that's one of the main reasons that they ask for such hybrid solutions, or they're interested in learning about them.
Okay, fine. Hans, thank you, Despina. Hans, can I bring you in on this, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for a platform like ours, it's very important that the connectivity on vessels is good enough to join the platform. And luckily we see the connectivity is improving over the last years. Nowadays we see we have 97% of the cases no problems with internet connectivity at all. And yeah, that's good, because platforms like us smoothen the pre-arrival process at the port or the port or terminal of the destination. So it's really really important to improve connectivity, but we see also a lot of improvement is done the last years.
Okay, great, thank you. And okay, so the connectivity issue is sorted. What about the application of digitalization? One hears it, the term used quite a lot in the abstract, but in practical terms, where are companies and vessels benefiting most from the use of digitalization, and how will they benefit going forward? Already we've had reference to CII and future fuels, the whole business of emissions monitoring. Shall we stay in the same order? David, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. I think if we look at one of the other overarching agenda items with crew welfare, I think there's certainly wins to be had there. The administrative burden is often cited as one of the most growing concerns for example, in the Seafarer Happiness Index, that crew simply feel overwhelmed with performing meaningless manual tasks. And that's typically associated with the clerical tasks of moving data from one system to another or from system to forms. And I think there are great potentials there in both improving speed and accuracy of reporting and, of course, relieving that administrative burden by digitalizing some of those record-keeping functions. And examples of that could be noon reports, where there's been done a lot of work in standardizing a data set. Most of that data can easily be picked up from bridge navigation systems, engine control rooms, and cargo handling systems. Another area could be inventory management systems. By being online and digitalized, they could continuously track stocks on board, supplies and pre-order fuel, spares and food. I mean, take all that standard householding functionality out of the daily work and leave it to the machines to handle most of that. And these are just two examples. That could be also cargo documentation, safety management systems, updating maintenance and inspection records. There's a lot of reporting going on a vessel that could easily be digitalized.
Okay, thank you. Before I move on, let me just ask a bit about the problem of human error. I mean, we've got a rather unfortunate recent precedent here in the UK of where entering, I believe, the wrong data brought down the whole air traffic control system of the country for a few days. Is there a danger that the man-machine interface could actually lead to failures that would disable vessels?
Yeah, I would say so. If the software handling the data isn't intelligent in any way, it should have some sort of predictive modeling built in that kind of says this data doesn't seem to be in line with what you've previously reported and what we'd expect to see from values in this field. So you could certainly make software more intelligent to avoid those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you. And Despina, maybe you can, as well as answering the question, say a little bit more about the Columbia performance optimization control room and the sort of similar systems that a lot of ship managers have in operation today.
Well, first of all, I would say David has covered quite well the adoption of digitalization and what improvements it can bring to the shipping industry in general and to companies that use it as well. However, I would like to make a comment. I think it was mentioned actually by Mark earlier that these new technologies and digitalization are helping the shipping industry achieve its goals, but it's important to remember that they're not the end goal. They are the means to it. So our focus should be on how technology is used, the benefits or opportunities that it can offer, and that's not only in streamlining operations and cutting costs, but also in matters relating to ESG. And I think that's some of the reasons that all these companies are using these performance tools. While I would say that while vessel and fleet optimization tools can make a substantial contribution towards these goals, to fully leverage their potential, the industry must adopt them on a broader scale. And for these solutions to become a standard choice, they must be affordable and they must offer a compelling return on investment. And of course, the ease of use of these technologies is also very crucial. Shipping companies require solutions that are user-friendly, that are easily integrated into their existing operations, that do not require extensive training or resources. We see all these technology providers now entering the maritime industry. And I think that's a good thing because we see that digital tools are becoming more affordable and the cost is becoming less of a barrier. Okay,
thank you. But talking about costs and return on investment, what sort of time frame are we looking at here? Is it a short term, 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 years, or is it something longer that people have to think about when investing in digitalization?
Is this question to me?
Yes,
I
sorry.
think that's a big question.
It's certainly a big question, but I would say it depends on each company and what they're asking for, because there are many shipping companies, especially the larger ones with more complex operations, that want more of a customized solution. So I would say that costs more and would probably take some more time, but in the long term, it's very beneficial to them. And then you have the smaller companies that, you know, would probably want something that is more off the shelf, because we have these solutions now. So it depends on each situation, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And Hans, your company has a very specific application. Perhaps you can tell us about that.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, what we do or what we see is that a lot of administration time is needed when a vessel has arrived at berth. So documents exchange start, the reviewing of documents will be done at the jetty of terminal. To be clear, for liquid bulk terminals, I think for container terminals it's more automated already. But for liquid bulk terminals, we see a lot of delays. Starting at the jetty, and that's why we introduce a software tool to collect all needed information to prepare the operations in advance. And of course, the previous subject, internet connectivity, is very important to that. But also the already mentioned, it's important to create one standard, and that's what we also did here in the ARE region, create a standard for all vessels, but also for the agents and surveyors to get a collaboration platform. And I think that's the thing, the projects with the highest impact, the greatest impact, are projects that are not in one company, only in one company, but also more broader over the total chain. And if you look to the current initiatives, or a lot of initiatives, you see that the more abstract they are, the more it's a big bet for the ROE. When can you get the benefit from a project when it's too abstract? And there's a lot talking about the abstract projects, and that's why we introduced a more bottom-up tool to start with standardizing and make it more concrete from the bottom.
Okay, you mentioned your region. That's the Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Antwerp region, is it, that you specialize in?
Yes, that's right.
And do you have any activities outside that region?
We are expanding now to the Singapore region and the Houston region.
Okay. And do you see any difference between consumer or customer readiness or expectations from Europe and, shall we say, Southeast Asia?
Yeah, the readiness, you can even see the difference in the readiness of digitalization tools here in Europe. If you compare the German region with the Dutch region, you see a big difference. If you look to the Houston area, they are quite far, and also the Singapore region, they are quite far in digitalization. So that's almost on the same level. But we expect other regions are more difficult.
Okay, so sorry, the German region is ahead of the Dutch region?
Yeah, ahead of the Dutch and the Belgian region, even as the French. But if you look to the German, or if you look to the Singapore, Korean and Houston region, it's more about the regulations that are less far than here in Europe. In Houston, not so in Singapore. that are delaying or give some problems in introducing a tool like this.
Okay, thank you. And David, KVH, I believe, is an American corporation. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see a difference in readiness levels for digitalization between the US and other countries? One would assume that they are sort of in the lead.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I've seen there are differences that are kind of on a different level. The industry we're serving in the US is very different from the industry in Germany and in Greece, for example. There's a lot of offshore activity, obviously, out of Houston, and there's a lot of fishing in the Pacific Northwest, and whereas they don't have the same concentration, at least, of merchant shipping over there. So I would say there are lots of differences, but not necessarily on the readiness level, but more on the needs level.
Okay, thank you. And Despina, a word about the Cypriot and perhaps also Greek markets.
Well, obviously, we provide services globally, so we could compare some of the regions. And I would say that in Cyprus and in Greece, contrary to general belief, there are many shipping companies that are not only looking into digital solutions, but have already applied them and are very much ready, having employed people that can manage them. So their level of understanding of this digital solutions is actually quite high.
Great.
And their requirements as well. Sorry.
Yes. Fine, thank you. So let's widen the discussion out again. What do we see as the barriers and maybe even the risks to greater adoption of digitalization? Despina, can I stay with you?
Sure. You know, Bob, I get the same question over and over, whether the shipping industry is not ready or for technology or not embracing technology. And I believe that as an industry, we need to start challenging this assumption, because the shipping industry does embrace technology. We have seen many ship owners and ship operators look at digital tools for various aspects of their business operations. And obviously, it depends on the company. They're not all looking at the same solutions. They have different levels of engagement. But I'd say there's a growing acceptance in the industry for digital tools. Where we see resistance to change, overcoming this barrier, it needs strong leadership, it needs effective management strategies, but most importantly, I feel it needs clear communication about the benefits of these tools and the long-term vision of the company. And we've discussed the cost previously. It can be a barrier. The initial investment required for digitalization, it can include hardware, software, it can include training. So it can be substantial for some companies. However, what we see now is that many shipping companies realize that they can trial ideas on a couple of their ships before, opting for a fleet-wide deployment later. And this makes it much easier. It makes them understand that it's relatively cheap to install a software compared to the operating and other costs that they may have. So in other words, digital tools do not have to be risk heavy to trial out. And another issue we see is data integration. Ships and shipping companies, they often use a mix of legacy systems and new digital solutions, which leads to challenges in integrating data and systems. So standardizing these systems and having interoperability should be prioritized when developing digital tools. And this is what we advise our customers as well. They can gradually phase out legacy systems and invest in solutions that facilitate their data integration. I'll stop here. I don't want to take over. I mean, there are many concerns. But
Thank you, Despina. I
you.
mean, we may very well come back on that. But yes, I'm glad you mentioned that sort of integration of legacy systems, because we had a related point, I suppose, in the previous panel on skills, talking about not only bringing people with the new skill sets into the industry, but also integrating the existing workforce with that. And it's good to see that there's also a technical aspect in terms of the systems themselves, as well as the people. But moving on, I'll come to Hans in a minute, because I saw you nodding your head at the beginning of Despina's intervention. But first off, regarding the question of it not being risk heavy to trial out systems, David, can I ask you for your perspective on this, on KVH's perspective, please?
Yeah, I made a note earlier when we talked about in one of the other sessions about barriers, and what Hans mentioned right now actually confirmed that most of their clients are on a cloud-based system. Was that what you said, Hans? And
that's correct.
I think that with the omnipresence of good connectivity on the vessels, you will see more and more applications being launched as cloud and as a service, and that would remove some of the capex barriers, you could say, to digitalization. If you can get a service if you can get a solution paid monthly as a service instead of having to invest hugely and heavily upfront, that's a big help. We launched our own connectivity as a service program, and we've seen that really hitting a chord with ship management, especially. But shipping companies also need help to provide insight, or need to help solution providers by providing insight into their pain points and their cost structures to help the providers design the right solutions and present them with realistic ROI analysis so that they can make their decisions based on that. But I think definitely cloud computing will be a big removal of barriers. If you no longer have to go on board, install software, have requirements to hardware on board, that's a big one. And the other one that I would like to mention is the one that has been also mentioned: complexity of integration across a fleet that could be spanning 10, 20 years of age, could be from 5, 10, 20 different owners if you're a ship manager. It's really difficult to handle all that in a single software system. For that, I think standardization, open access to data is needed, and not just on board the vessel and between the owner and the vessel, or the manager and the vessel, but also I think it was Olav that talked about the ecosystem of stakeholders. And Hans, as you also work with port agents, the many stakeholders that you need to communicate with could also deal with some standardization. Port authorities, terminal operators, charterers, everybody needs to be accepting the same standards of communication to ease this up. So standardization, complexity, and cost, I would say, are the three biggest barriers, but slowly dissolving.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to write those down. And Hans, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. It's very important to prevent also a fragmented landscape of all different solutions at each port, etc. Because of course it's very helpful to create a standard and for data exchange purposes, but and that's needed. But I think we also need to prevent too much solutions, and that's one of the things that cloud-based solutions by introducing better internet cloud-based solutions are growing, and I think that could be a thing for the future, that there are too many different solutions. But what not was mentioned, and maybe it's too easy, is the cyber risk of all. And was wondering if you can tell us more about that from your perspective, David and Despina, or Despina.
Yes, cyber risk, Despina.
It is obviously a concern, because as more systems become interconnected, the risk for cyber attacks or data breaches increases with that. So it is a major concern, particularly given that there's a potential impact on safety and operations, and we know how important that is in this industry. Addressing these issues is very important. It should be a big priority. It requires to have robust measures, having data encryption, having access controls. Very important is employee training, and obviously having regular security audits. And also we've seen that there are industry-wide guidelines and best practices that have been developed. So I think this can help shipping companies mitigate the risks and build more resilient cybersecurity frameworks.
Okay, thank you very much, Despina. David, would you like to come in on this?
No, I'll just say that it's already a very present agenda item on most discussions we have with customers. So we, of course, have as our main concern to secure the connectivity on board from the Ethernet interface on board until the egress point on shore. But the next level is, of course, securing the networks on board and train the crew. And we are, you could say, involved in all of those aspects. And yeah, we see that as a crucial point. Not specifically to all this, but of course, I mean, to the ongoing digitalization. But as you become more and more depending on digital solutions, of course, cyber security becomes a bigger and bigger concern. Not necessarily because the threat is becoming bigger, but because your dependence on it is so much bigger.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. So before I move on to the question of training and skills, let's have a look at these questions. One, a gentleman, or well, an anonymous attendee is asking, would you say that digital solutions are struggling to break through in developing regions? I mean, for example, a country like Egypt. Despina, you seem to have a handle on the worldwide adoption of digitalization. Developing countries, do you think they are lagging in this respect?
Well, I would say that some countries are facing challenges in terms of adopting digitalization, and this has a lot to do with the existing infrastructure, with the skills gap, which we have in other parts of the world as well. We should say cybersecurity concerns as well. But what we see, because shipping is an international industry, the more this type of services or solutions are applied to other regions, then everybody else needs to follow. But it's definitely more difficult because of the current situation that might exist in each country.
Okay, thank you. Would either David or Hans like to come in?
I don't have a lot of experience that I can comment with here. I have one topic that could kind of bridge the subject into skills, but Hans, unless if you have something, please feel free to chip in.
It's not resolved.
No, I don't. I have nothing to add here.
So go ahead, David.
Yeah. So we've recently been part of sponsoring and developing a digital literacy program in Nigeria. One you could say is a developing country. Where they are trying to strengthen the local and national industry. And together with our partner down there, Field Base, we've launched an initiative to train seafarers on very basic digital skills so that they know how to work with emails and Excel sheets and what is an operating system. I mean, there are very, very big skill gaps, as has been mentioned, and that of course help those countries in also adapting more modern tools and applications.
Thank you. We've got another question. I'm not sure if we've covered this. This is from Gert Bunt. And what are the panel's thoughts on backup of using digital tools such as hybrids, radio solutions, coming from experiences like crossing the South Pacific with lost satellite communications, broken mainmast on the Atlantic in a storm, being declined access to ports due to failed communication. Do the panelists have any thoughts or comments on that?
I think what Despina mentioned earlier is that most merchant shipping, at least, would always have more than one carrier available to them. So if the geostationary doesn't work or the geostationary doesn't work, there's a failover. Is it a case of having the more the merrier? Yeah, whatever makes sense in the budget, I would say. Yeah, and if you can get a blended one that even costs you the same as three put together, that would be even better. So hopefully those traumatic situations of losing communications and being denied port access won't persist too much in the future. Before we bring Martin in, I think he's just trying out his system in the background. I wanted to go back and touch on the question of skills. We heard that being discussed in our last panel. Are there any particular skills in terms of IT familiarity or analytics that are needed by the shipping industry, both at sea or indeed for shore-based positions? Or is it very much the same as other industries in the sort of digital natives that are now being sought? Despina, can I begin with you on that?
For the shore-based positions, I would say that definitely we're in a path where the needs will be as the needs that we find in any other industry. That's why I posed the question to Heidi before, because we see it as a company that many times we have to compete with other industries in order to be able to attract a top talent into our company. In terms of onboard ships, I think seafarers will need to have, the basic IT skills, basic data handling skills, being able to do a first level troubleshoot, and definitely having cybersecurity awareness. But on the shore side, that's where we need to be able to attract people that have a good grasp of, data science and data analytics, IT and system administrators. We need to have cybersecurity experts. So we are moving towards that direction. I think we're already there, actually, that we need to be able as an industry to compete against other industries in order to be able to have this talent.
And am I right in saying that based in Cyprus, actually you're in quite a fortunate position because you have a highly skilled and well-educated workforce? Or do you find that you're recruiting people with IT skills from abroad to move to Cyprus?
We definitely have highly skilled people in Cyprus and many people moving to Cyprus, because Cyprus is becoming a center for other tech industries. So that's where the difficulty comes, because we need to compete against the fintech industry, for example, to be able to hire people. So we do have skilled people, but it's still difficult to be able to attract them.
Okay, thank you. And David, some thoughts on recruitment and skills?
Yeah, I'd say, again, what Despina says, basically, I would echo that. On the shore side, you need to compete with every other industry, and it's not just about, you can say, the job itself. It's also about perks and location and work from home benefits, and it's so many other things. On the ships, I think IT familiarity, cybersecurity awareness, and I think it was Henrik that mentioned that the role is going to change in the future from doing a lot of interaction to probably observing a lot more. But you still need a critical sense when you see numbers passing your screen. Are these numbers making sense at all, or is it outside what we would expect if the software doesn't capture that for you? So still some holistic thinking and an ability to analyze without necessarily being the analyst.
Thank you. And Hans, do you have any closing comments on recruitment and skills?
Not on recruitment, on skills. I guess it's important to know that platforms like us have a lot of important data and could be a really good source for this and data analysts for the coming future. So I guess there's more data available than you think. And
thank you. And for the last few minutes of our discussion, I'm going to invite Martin, if you're online there. Martin, would you like to switch on your camera if you're there, not out having a cup of tea? Let's see if he's going to join us. Because apart from, there we go, apart from being a very eminent market analyst, Martin in recent years has been doing quite a lot of work on digitalization. Indeed, in a prior discussion, he disclosed that he'd written his first computer program when he was software program in 1971, I think, when he was working for UK Shipbuilding. And then, of course, as head of Clarkson Research, they pioneered a lot of data crunching to do very sophisticated market predictions. So, Martin, would you like to share a few comments? You've been listening into the discussions this morning and the digitalization panel. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thanks, Bob, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, I've been listening in. You predicted everything. I was having a cup of tea too, so it's. I started looking at the digital stuff for shipping specifically about 10 years ago. And I sort of, in a sense, boxed the compass. And I think a lot of the things I've really enjoyed listening to the discussion. And I don't think there's anything major that hasn't been mentioned and covered. And what's, I think, so encouraging to me is to see that, here now you can have a panel with companies who are actually doing this stuff, and putting it out there. And that was not the case 10 years ago. And I think we're on a difficult trajectory. I guess just as a very brief, two very brief comments. I think you can come into the digital thing from two different angles for ships, just as you can personally. At one level, I've been a late and reluctant convert to iPhones, and I must say that the ability, I think Steve Jobs was absolutely right. He came up with a rigorous system when he designed the iPhone, and he made sure that the apps were consistent and usable and upgradable to certain standards. And as a result, there are an awful lot of things that you can do on apps on the phones, which stand alone. They're upgradable, they're easy to use, you can use them anywhere where you've got some sort of wireless access. And I think that's, there's an awful lot of stuff that can be done with ships and on ships using standalone apps. And that is something that I think the industry can cope with very well as it shakes down. But there's another level of, you talked a lot about communication, both on the logistics front. You had a nice session about logistics, but also on board ship. And I think perhaps one of the most challenging things to me is the communication on ships, because you've got at least 8 major systems on board ships, which are all mission critical systems. These are systems that absolutely have to be right. You can't moor a tanker, or do the ballasting management by just with systems that are not totally lined up. And I think the challenge of getting these systems to interface with each other is the first step. And, the lands, most people are using lands. And of course, lands are not always that good at communicating with each other. And the great challenge then is getting information from the equipment into some sort of central system. And I think there's, a lot of that depends on the equipment manufacturers and how they structure the digital information that they give you. And then secondly, you have to get the integrated digital systems on board, which I think is a bit of a nightmare. I mean, it would be wonderful if you could have the sort of canvas systems that the cars use, ships. And I think that's, there are smaller ships that are doing that. But the whole issue of getting onboard systems to communicate and most importantly, rolling out upgrades without screwing up other systems is, I think this is going to take a bit of time. And so it's encouraging to see so many people who are actually getting in there and doing it, because that's the only way you solve these problems. And, incidentally, I mean, I read up quite a bit of what was going on land with the I4 stuff. And I think they are really, it's not just shipping that struggles. The land-based, it works best in manufacturing. But even the land-based industries are struggling to get systems out and working. McKinsey came up with this phrase, pilot purgatory. The idea being that you set up a pilot scheme, which is absolutely fantastic, and you get it working, and it's working fine, and then you try to roll it out, and it just doesn't. People find it very, very difficult to make the rollout work, and that's where you sort of start to run into problems, and that's certainly happening on land. And of course, factories on land don't have the problem that they're. If you've got 40 or 50 ships with legacy onboard systems, it's not easy. And so I'm encouraged to see things moving along, and I'd like to congratulate everybody for such an interesting discussion, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Martin. Do any of our panelists, would any of them like to dialogue with Martin or ask him anything or comment on his observations? Because if not, I think I'm going to thank our digital. I think it was, it's all self-explanatory what you say.
Well, I have a question if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay, yes.
We've got somebody.
I just, David, pardon me. It's just very difficult now, at least for me personally. Martin was my professor, so it's not very easy.
Well, there you go. You see, what could be nicer than that?
But I definitely agree. Yeah. Sorry, David. Please go ahead.
Martin, what do you think? What do you see as the biggest obstacle to this, to getting out of purgatory? I mean, is it hesitation on the customer or the ship owner side, or is it inadequate solutions?
I don't think I have to tell you the answer to this one. I mean, I could give you an example. 3 or 4 years ago, I did a very nice, actually another my student who had a big, very nice, well-structured shipping company with 40 or 50 ships and an IT director, and we did an afternoon panel on this stuff. And as I was at the end, they said, "Well, what could we do?" And I had a couple of suggestions, and one of the things I always think is if you get things like sort of internal, get everybody with an internet connection and an email address, and this was that wasn't always the case then that is the biggest thing. And just to illustrate it, I said, well, if you've got that, if there's a junior engineer and he's got some little problem, he can send an email to his friend who's a junior engineer on another ship, and they can have a discussion about it. Anyway, there was 2 or 3 chief engineers sitting at the back, and you can almost feel the body language on this, the idea that a junior engineer should actually be in touch with somebody else on a different ship about his engine,
Right.
I mean, this did not go down well. And I think, in a way, we have a lot of lessons to learn. And the issues about getting young people, young chief engineers onto the ships who are really IT orientated and who just take it as second nature. I think there's a lot of that sort of thing, which would be very helpful indeed if you can do it. And it's just hard to have the confidence. And I think the IMO the watch keeping regulations and things, I gather, are not very helpful to this either. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone's got any comments on that, but the idea of getting young people into fairly responsible positions is, before they're 50 years old, is a possible issue.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Again, I think you've silenced everyone, including former students. So
no, Bob, I would say that I also share Martin's position that we still have a lot of challenges to face, and at least on the technological side, we've seen a lot of progress being made in terms of improved connectivity. But we still have challenges, especially in remote areas. But as we mentioned before, I think the ongoing development of LEO satellite networks, the adoption of hybrid connectivity solutions, they hold promise for addressing these challenges and ensuring that ships can be reliably connected, and also enhancing not only efficiency but most importantly safety at sea.
Thank you. And perhaps I can ask you a question, Despina. We've heard diversity mentioned, and Sean saying he hoped it was going to be featured even more in 2 years' time at ISW. Do you see the greater prominence of sort of IT skills as an opportunity to attract more women into shipping, or is that a red herring?
I definitely see this as being very promising for attracting women into the industry and also young people. While I was president at WISTA, we had a survey together with the IMO on the number of women in the industry globally, and we looked at many different industries, and what we saw was that there was a very high percentage of women on boards in maritime tech companies and environmental tech companies. So I believe the advent of enhanced technology and of digitalization into the industry would definitely help towards increasing diversity and inclusion in the industry.
Perfect. Thank you. I think at this point I am going to thank our digitalization panelists. I mean, obviously, do feel free to stay on and listen. You may want to turn off your cameras. The so-called fireside chat with Martin, although it's a remote one, and I can't quite see a fire in your room there, Martin. And we could now be discussing markets. And I think one of the themes of today's summit that I picked up on is and thank you again to my digitalization panelists. One of the themes is the closing gap between ship owners and ship managers, and the fact that ship managers, are now being expected and indeed are wanting to operate ships with the same sort of standards as in-house operations. They pointed out, though, I can't remember which of our speakers pointed out that the thing that they didn't share with the ship owner was the concerns over the balance sheet. And if we bear in mind that this is a ship owning as well as ship management summit, clearly, some kind of evaluation of the markets is part and parcel of being a successful ship operator. And I didn't give you a full build-up, Martin. I think you're fairly well known, but we've already divined that you've been a professor. You've written, in particular, a really best-selling book on maritime economics that's now, I believe, is it in its 4th edition, and is really taught worldwide. And I think perhaps you can say a little bit more about this in a moment. All I would say was that it seems to me that central to your thinking, especially in the early parts of your career, was the idea of shipping cycles. And my question to you would be, do they still apply in the same way as before, or perhaps not? Are we beyond shipping cycles?
Oh, well, thanks, Bob. And thanks for the nice introduction. Incidentally, if there was a fire in your office, I fear I'd lose you because you would have to go outside, right?
Yes. I'm going to switch off and leave you to it, Martin.
Well, that's a very good question, and the whole cycles are at the heart of the business, and I have no doubt at all that they're going to continue. I mean, I've got data going back to 1740 or thereabouts, in fact a bit earlier than that, and we've had 22 cycles since then. So some of them have been quite substantial ones. I mean, really, one or two have been situations where fortunes flowed in overnight, and others have just been a longer grind. But I have no doubt that if we look ahead, the average over the years is about 7 years, well, a cycle every 7 or 8 years, and some sort of crisis every 10 years. And that seems to me to be, something that's in an intrinsic part of the cycle of the whole business. But there was another, a famous historian, Fernand Braudel, a French historian, who wrote some very nice books about European history a few years ago. He talked about cycles, but he talked about something called the secular trend, and he believed that our societies roll ahead. You have the short-term cycles which control markets, but under the surface, these short cycles roll along on trends which work together to you can't really see them, they're under the surface, but they are happening all the time. And I feel very much at the moment that the industry, notwithstanding whatever cycle we might have in freight rates, we are moving to a sort of new phase in this secular trend, which just because there's a whole bunch of things happening today, which are really, if you were meaning if you were master of a sailing ship, you would be busy getting your ship into right order to deal with something, some heavy seas ahead. And the reason, one of the reasons for thinking that is that we are sort of at the end of a very interesting period, because just as I had a chat with Bob about this earlier, and in about 2.5 weeks, October the 6th, it's the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and that was a great watershed in the shipping industry, because in the 30 years, the 20 to 25 to 30 years before that, the shipping industry was in a just a wonderful, expansive role. The cargo was growing in almost double digits every year. You could walk out and get time charters of 15, 20 years for your tanker or bulk carrier. And there were many of the great shipping fortunes were built up during this era. And I remember vividly, I just started work then, and in the summer, and indeed, we just published a market outlook report in March 1973, and the orders were flooding in for tankers. And this was totally unexpected, because 1972 had been a pretty miserable year. And the general consensus was we had a big order book in 1972, and the market was in a trough, and it wouldn't recover till 1976. And that was a universal prediction at that time. I don't think anyone really disagreed with this. And then suddenly in 1973, the tanker market especially absolutely went through the roof. And I remember the chap I worked for, a chap called John Stapleton, every day we'd see the new tanker orders come in, and he'd say, who's mad, them or us? And I think by the end of September, we'd had orders for about 120 million deadweight tons of tankers at a time when the tanker fleet was 190 million deadweight tons. So we'd had well over half the fleet ordered in about 9 months. And that whole thing came to an end in October the 6th when the Yom Kippur war started. And then we had the Arab oil embargo. The oil price went up 5 times, and there were potential shortages of oil. And the industry, I think, then moved into a period where energy prices were starting to be a major issue. And there was about 15 years of adjustment to that. And one of the lessons we learned from it, because there was a second crisis in 1979 when the oil price went from $10 to over $30 a barrel, and that I think taught us 2 lessons. The first was that I don't think anybody took on board seriously the impact which this enormous increase in energy costs was going to have on the world economy and the shipping economy. I mean, I don't remember it being discussed very much at all at that time. We saw lots of problems, but we didn't see price elasticity as a major issue. But in fact, as a result of those price increases, the crude oil trade fell by about 50% between 1979 and 1983. By 1983, you put a nearly new tanker on the market, and you were lucky to get a new VLCC that had cost $60 million, and you were lucky to get $3 million offer for it. Now, the point of this whole run-in is, I think we're now 50 years later, and we're moving towards a period where there seems to be a whole bunch of these things of what Brodel would have called the secular trend, which have been building up over the last year or two, or the last decade or so. Of course, we've had the pandemic, and there's an undercurrent of feeling that there may well be other pandemics. We've had the Ukraine war, which has undermined, has really dented the global grain trade, and is not over yet by any means. We've got interest rates moving up steadily. Every so often we hear that they're not going to go up again, and then they go up again. And of course, the lending risks are going up, so that if you look at the cost analysis for the average modern ship today, the cost of transport has gone up by 50-60% in recent, if you take into account the interest rates. And on top of that, you've got Asia, which was the great driving force in the last 10 years. China was just, I'm just so pleased I was part of the great China boom. And I don't think there's ever been anything quite like in shipping, quite like what happened between 2002 and 2010 with the Chinese economy. But China is now becoming a more mature economy, and there's a whole agenda of other things to look at. And equally, we've just had the G20 in India. The Indian Ocean is becoming an area which is clearly starting to realign itself, and absolutely the same thing in the Middle East and the Middle East Asia area. So geopolitical forces are changing as well. And if you put all of these together, and you are the master of a sailing ship, you would think maybe you can sniff a hurricane coming somewhere. You're not quite sure where or when, but maybe now is the time to start putting your ship in order. We've heard a lot this morning about digitalisation, and I really believe that that if you can get your digital systems, either whether it's small apps on mobile phones or big apps integrated within the ship and with the shore, that whichever way you do it, these are all going to they're going to make a shipping company more seaworthy in the years ahead. That's the aim. You know, you're going to be better able to weather whatever the market throws at us. And the fuel economy, I think, in some ways it's not less of a challenge, but there's not so much. The choices are not so difficult. There's not so much on offer right now, because of course, you know, it's not about predicting the future. It's about what you can do right now to prepare for the future. And I'd say that the options for a company are much greater on the organization and the digital system side than they are on the fuel side, which is simply something that we're going to have to find ways to live with the technology that's coming along. So I know I've not talked much about what freight rates are going to do next year, and if Bob wants me to say a word or two about that later, I can do that. But Bob, that's my sort of summary of. I think I'm not saying there's hurricane warnings out, but I think you can sniff something in the air that there's a change in the weather on the way, and that's something which is very important for shipping companies. And of course, there are 26,000 shipping companies out there. Half of them only have one ship. I mean, I'm not talking about brass plate companies. A lot of small shipping companies, which are very effective in today's environment. There's a lot of medium-sized companies. There's a few very big ones. And I think each company in each sector, to pick up another theme that's been really emphasized this morning, is going to have to see its own way forward. And a very big part of that, I think, is the maturing role played by the ship management companies, which, you know, have evolved from being a very cheap way to cut costs in the 1980s when you were absolutely desperate, to a more interactive role, which has evolved today, but still with these issues of who is really responsible for the underlying issues in terms of making these new systems work. Are they the responsibility? How does the cookie crumble between the management company, if you decide to use a management company, and the shipping company, if you decide to go down that route? And again, this ties in with this very wide range of different sizes and types of companies and different sectors, 30 or 40 different market sectors to look at as well. So, I mean, I know I've not, that's my feeling about this, Bob. I don't know if you're expecting to have a fireside chat and
No, this is perfect, Martin, and I will take up your invitation to ask you about freight rates shortly. But before then, let me just perhaps bring in, you talked about different sectors and shipping sectors or segments, and when I first joined the industry, the feeling was that the shipyard capacity was sufficiently constrained in that if there was suddenly a great boom in, shall we say, the tanker market, then yards would be absolutely flooded with tanker orders. Therefore, they would have no slots available, meaning that it gave a chance for the other sectors to benefit from a more favorable demand-supply balance. Now, perhaps that no longer applied with that huge expansion of shipyard capacity in the early 2000s, at the time of that China effect, that kind of explosion that you referred to. But maybe now we're returning to a situation where, at least as far as the major yards are concerned, the explosion, firstly, in container ship orders, perhaps because of the disruption to the supply chains that kicked in with the time of the pandemic, and then LNG orders, perhaps with the geopolitical disruption caused by the Russian-Ukraine war. How do you see the situation now regarding new ship orders, shipyard capacity?
Well, it's a good question. As far as the capacity is concerned, I think that, you know, within a certain time frame, the yards, if you pay them right, if the money's right, they will find ways to produce more ships. The constraint is always long lead items. That very often, if you suddenly get a change in demand, then it can be difficult. It means that the order book short term doesn't build up very quickly because the yards can't get the long lead items they need to book the orders. So you start to build long order books. But at the moment, I mean, just to put it in perspective, the shipbuilding output peaked at around 150 million, 155 million deadweight in 2011. And that was less than we were, the predictions where it might go to 190. It never did, a bit slipped forward, not a lot. It's now been running for the last 5 or 6 years around 70, 80 million deadweight a year, which is about half the previous level. But the big yards are there, sort of capacity. I think my sense is the constraint is more that you put your finger on the major issue. I mean, the containers, which had behaving in the traditional way, they've had an enormous influx of money. Billions of dollars flowed into the sector, and they are now, they have an order book still that's 26-27% of the fleet, and they keep on motoring. These guys. Gas is being pretty busy, and so half the order book today is containers and gas. But tankers and bulkers have only got about 7 or 8% of the fleet on order, which is historically, you have to go a long, long way back to get down to that level. I mean, that's like if that's spread over 2 years, it's 2 or 3% of the fleet, and that includes replacement. And there's not much scrapping going on. My sense is most of the bulk owners are sitting on their hands. They're running ships. They're continuing to run the old ships. So they're not scrapping much. They're really a bit reluctant to order new tonnage because if you don't have to, you want to wait till the digital stuff shakes down. I mean, the yards are coming out with digital packages, but it takes a little while. And do you want to go for dual fuel, methanol? It's mostly what's being ordered at the moment is methanol, but who's taking bets on whether you'll get methanol for delivery on a ship in 2025? Probably not, actually. You'd be very lucky to get your hands on any methanol because, for one thing, the car industry is going to be gobbling it all up, or it's not the car industry. We were just hearing about the Southampton port, which has gone zero by switching to electricity. But that is only zero carbon if they use only green electricity. And I you can anticipate that in this country, green electricity is going to be in very short supply. And so, if you want to deliver your certificate of, green cargo handling, you'll need a separate certificate that shows that you only use green electricity. And the percentages are quite small now. So I think the shipbuilding scene is marking time, which traditionally, I would say is the best thing that can possibly happen. What economists love is for ship owners not to order ships, because it's the only way to guarantee rates are better than they would have been otherwise.
And could it be that with bulk owners, the resistance to ordering is also that they, because their routes are less predictable, maybe they operate more on the spot market. They're not quite sure if they're going to be able to obtain the alternative fuels that new buildings would require where they will be trading?
I mean, I don't think there's any, the chances of people shipping companies getting much green fuel this decade, unless they actually do what Maersk is trying to do, go out and actually invest in companies that will give you contracts. There's so much demand out there in the global, in the land-based economies. I mean, at the moment, we're busy moving, globally moving the car industry from internal combustion engines burning gasoline to battery cars. Okay, last year the energy in gasoline was half the energy of the total world electricity production. So if you move all of the cars into electricity, just to cover that, you need to increase your current electricity production, green production, total production by 50%. This is not going to happen. It's not moving forward at that pace. If you go in and look at the numbers, which I do a lot, I mean, I don't see it. I think I would certainly think about a dual fuel engine, but I wouldn't. I'd be much happier if I had a charterer behind me who was ready to underprice the likely cost of maybe $3,000 a ton, $500 a ton for heavy fuel oil today in Rotterdam. Probably you could find that your heavy fuel oil is $2,000 a ton because it could piggyback behind the green fuel, you know.
And what prospects do you see for the tanker sector going forward? I mean, you've got the current disruption of the Russian situation and the sanctions, but I mean, also there was all this talk about peak oil. Do you see that? Do you see that coming or not? Well,
you sort of have to build up your position here in the sense that the economy is not really going green that fast. It's being driven by business cycles, and at the moment the business cycle is very low. I mean, one of the things I track is world industrial production. I mean, GNP is not such a good indicator. But we saw a big bounce of industrial production after it went down during COVID, came back very fast after COVID. It's now gone down again. It's not like after the credit crisis, and it's sort of wandering along about 0.5% growth, or maybe minus 0.5% growth at the moment. There's not much push coming in from the industrial side at the moment. And that does tend to sort of feed through into the underlying demand for energy. And if you do start to see the oil prices, the demand picking up, then you might very well find that turns into high oil prices, which again, we know from history that will then reduce domestic consumption. And we're going to see this switch of cars very rapidly from, that's really building up now. And they do use an awful lot of gasoline. So I think I notice the ordering is more in the small to medium sizes for the tankers at the moment. And I think, with a small order book, you've got a decent chance, if the economy comes back, of getting a nice bounce there on the tanker side. And I'd go back what the market's looking at, which is the sort of MR Aframax sector, probably better than the Vs. But I always say that because it's a more negotiable asset. But I think all of these decisions, Bob, this is something between each company and its conscience. This is not like the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, you went into these cycles and basically, you ordered a ship, you needed to order a ship, you took a punch, you thought the time was about right. You could just order a ship a bit like the one you had last time, but a bit bigger. And you took delivery and you got it as cheap as you could. And you roll forward in one way or the other. The cycles work out and you make a decent return, and maybe you arbitrage a bit as well. You get it right. So, that is not the situation today. We're in a very different market, and I think companies every company, even the small ones, need to sit down and look again at where they think they are and what they think they are really going to add value within the next few years. And that comes before, and then you decide what you're going to order or where you're going to position yourself, between new and old ships and big and small ships, and how close you think you can get to the cargo side, which I'd be looking at very hard. I think, forging bonds with the cargo is absolutely fundamental. Now, if you can do it.
So have you got any dark horses in way of sectors that, if you had a billion floating around, you might be tempted to have a punt on?
Well, I mean, when I when I took a punt, I bought a farm, not a ship. I think to some extent, it's 50. I've been doing this a long time, and I think one of the lessons you learn is that the owners are very good at this sort of thing, and they always know a bit more than you do. I mean, the great thing about an owner is they are really in the market because they have tentacles to all the brokers, the shipyards. Everybody wants to talk to an owner, and they get there a little bit earlier, and they get the sort of reality test because their ships are going into the loading zones and so forth. So I think it's very difficult to pick a sector, and at the moment, I think short term, I quite like the tankers. It's hard, and the small to medium, which is roughly what the market's doing. I think that's not bad. The containers and gas do look heavily ordered, and it's probably not I'm not sure there are that many niches there. Again, unless you can get in there and get some contracts. I think if I was doing it, I mean, look, Bob, you want to treat you're behaving as though shipping's just a gambling game, right? I've got to give you a tip for what's going to win the 330 at Epsom.
Me and all our readers, our listeners.
That is what it's been for the last 30 years. If you go on like that, you're going to go out of business. That's okay. My tip is that if you carry on treating shipping like a horse race, you will become just like the guys at the beginning of containerization. There was hundreds and hundreds of companies that couldn't see the writing on the wall when containerization came along. They all went out of business, every single one of them, because they didn't make many of the ones that did make the move were not able to manage it through. And the one company, the one person who really did see it coming and who really managed it properly and didn't rush in, but actually spent 10 years building a company that was capable of doing it. And that was Mr. Molly. And he really, and no wonder he sat from 1966 to 1976 while everyone else was hustling around and built his company. And within 10 years, Maersk was number one, and they went on doing that. His aim was to build a company that was ready for the future. And if you want to gamble, I would flip a coin, If I could give you a good tip, I wouldn't tell you anyway. I'd do it myself.
Well, I think that's a very good note to end on, Martin, because, playing devil's advocate, I brought you back to mentioning a lot of the themes that we've heard about today, about all the things that responsible ship managers, ship operators should be thinking about. And there is, quite a lot to be thinking about and planning. You, Martin, have been a mine of information as ever. Everyone may want to talk to ship owners. Everyone wants to listen to Martin Stopford. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our panelists as well and our keynote speakers. I'd like to thank our listeners. A reminder that the full recording will be available on the SMI website. Thank you very much to the technical staff that have helped put this together, and I'm going to wish you a very successful and enjoyable day and rest of London International Shipping Week. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.